Chapter 347. After shopkeeper Dong and the small table left, Mo Tinga dismissed the maid, arranged her own formation in the cultivation room, and entered the virtual sky world to rest. She told the maid Ayan that she wanted to rest for 3 to 5 days, and not to disturb her if there was nothing important. The maid was used to serving cultivators, and knew the rules very well. Needless to say, she said she would only clean the courtyard and would never enter the house. Mo Tinga was very satisfied. The mortals on North Pole Island were very sensible. Perhaps it was because the people in Yunzhong had long been used to living with cultivators, so they had a good understanding of their habits. In the next few days, Mo Tinga didn't do anything important. She just adjusted her breath, played with the spiritual beasts, and read Mo Yaoqing's cultivation notes. Half a month passed. Shopkeeper Dong came once, and she paid him dozens of spirit stones, saying she wanted to stay for a while. Shopkeeper Dong was very happy to see her paying so readily. He told her a lot about North Pole Island, and told her that if she needed anything, she could directly tell Ayan to call him. All the guests living here didn't need to pay extra for inquiring about information or buying things for her. Mo Tinga thanked him and asked him for a map without any politeness. On the map, North Pole Island was carefully marked with various spirit veins and the distribution of demonic beasts. Unfortunately, other places only had a rough outline. Yunzhong continent only had the distribution of the 3 big countries, and the locations of some cultivation groups weren't marked at all. In addition, Mo Tinga noticed that North Pole Island was quite far from Yunzhong continent. If she flew, it might take a long time. So she asked the maid how many ways to go to Yunzhong. The maid Ayan told her that there were several places on North Pole Island with transporting formations, which were very convenient to leave. Mo Tinga was relieved. It seemed the formation masters in Yunzhong were quite powerful. Transporting formations were the most complicated kind of formations, requiring very complicated skills and countless spirit stones. There weren't many transporting formations in the celestial pole. And even if there were, they were short distance and were controlled by big cultivation groups. Yunzhong, on the other hand, was just a small North Pole island, but it unexpectedly had several transporting formations. If she wanted to use transporting formations, she only needed to pay spirit stones. After resting for several days and recovering her energy, Mo Tinga finally left the small courtyard where she temporarily lived and went to the town. The maid Ayan said the bazaar on North Pole Island was famous in Yunzhong. Even core formation cultivators would come here to buy things. Mo Tinga was rather surprised to hear that. Kunzhong City, the most prosperous place for individual cultivators in the celestial pole, wasn't much. North Pole Island was just a small island in the northernmost part of Yunzhong. It was far less prosperous than Yunzhong itself. Fairy, this is our busiest street. On this street, you can buy anything you want, especially monster cores. As long as you can't think of it, there's nothing you can't buy. Ayan walked in front, proudly introducing the street to her. Mo Tinga originally planned to stroll around by herself, but Ayan said she was very familiar with the bazaar on North Pole Island. So after some thought, Mo Tinga decided to take Ayan with her. Is that really the case? Mo Tinga simply smiled at Ayan's question and asked. Of course she knew this was an exaggeration, but since Ayan dared to say this bazaar should have something worthy of praise. Of course, Ayan said. Reportedly, tens of thousands of years ago, our North Pole Island was still very desolate. Later, a cultivator came here and discovered spirit veins, so it gradually became lively. In the beginning, only some cultivation clans and small cultivation groups established themselves here. Later, other people discovered that there were a lot of sea beasts here, so they came here to hunt beasts. Gradually, today's North Pole Island came into being. I see. That's not all, Ayan said with a smile. Originally, when these cultivators hunted sea beasts, they would sell them inland. But because more and more people came to hunt beasts, many merchants simply set up branches here, specializing in collecting sea beasts' cores. Gradually, North Pole Island became the largest demonic beast core market in all of Yunzhong. Even the cores of land demonic beasts were sold here. It could be said that if you can't find a monster core on North Pole Island, it'll be very difficult to find one in all of Yunzhong. Is that so? Such a small island was unexpectedly the largest demonic beast core market in Yunzhong. If that was the case, she could see what rare demonic beast cores were, and buy any suitable ones. As soon as she walked into this so-called monster core street, she immediately heard one call after another. Fellow Taoist, do you want to buy a monster core? I have a high-grade sea beast core here. If it's damaged, I'll compensate you double the price. Seniors, our humble shop has a new batch of monster cores. They've just arrived from inland, and each one is guaranteed to be of high quality. First come, first served. We'll only sell them out. 1/5 rank cloud-splitting beast's core, starting from 1,000 spirit stones. If you're interested, please come inside and discuss in detail. Mo Tiange clicked her tongue in wonder. Market squares in the celestial pole were rarely this lively. Even if cultivators did business, they wouldn't hawk their wares like mortals. Most of them just quietly set up their stalls and waited for customers to come. In Yunzhong, however, it wasn't like this. Cultivators also hawked their wares and solicited customers like mortals. Perhaps it was because mortals in Yunzhong also cultivated. Therefore, in Yunzhong, there wasn't a huge difference between cultivators and mortals like in the celestial pole. Just as she was thinking, someone approached her. Fellow Taoist, are you interested in a 4th-rank thundercloud treading on snow beast's core? Mo Tiange waved her hand at the cultivator who solicited business, indicating she wasn't interested. She then continued to stroll on the street with Ian. The person who spoke to her was a foundation-building cultivator. In the celestial pole, how could a foundation-building cultivator do business like this? He probably wouldn't even be willing to set up a stall. Sure enough, the customs in Yunzhong were greatly different from those in the celestial pole. Fairy, are you just going to look around? You don't have anything you want? Ian asked eagerly. Mo Tiange glanced at her then asked with a smile. Do you have any shops to recommend? Ian twisted the handkerchief in her hand embarrassedly and said, Our boss also has a shop here. If you recommend customers there, you can give them a 10% discount. I also get a commission. From her first experience on North Pole Island, as well as what she saw and heard during this time, Mo Tiange already knew that this was the customs in Yunzhong. Their business was much more prosperous than in the celestial pole, so she just smiled. Seeing that Mo Tiange wasn't interested, Ian didn't say much, and started to introduce the shop in front of her. Fairy, please take a look. This Jade Chilim Pavilion is the shop of Tianyan Sect, the largest cultivation group on North Pole Island. There are a lot of things inside. You can even find 6th or 7th rank beast cores here. I heard the most precious treasure of Jade Chilim Pavilion is an 8th rank beast's inner core. 8th rank inner core? Tianyan Sect has nascent soul cultivators? Ian nodded. Tianyan Sect has 2 nascent soul cultivators, and Wuwei School also has a nascent soul cultivator. Our North Pole Island is very small. We only have these 3 nascent soul cultivators. North Pole Island was indeed very small. Mo Tiange had seen the map. Compared with Yunzhong continent, North Pole Island was just a small dot in the north, roughly equivalent to a city in the 3 big countries. But such a small island actually had 3 nascent soul cultivators. She really wondered how many nascent soul cultivators there were in the whole of Yunzhong. Perhaps it would be twice as many as the 2 poles? Fairy, do you want to go into Jade Chilim Pavilion to take a look? Mo Tiange nodded indifferently. Okay. She had nothing to do anyway, so she might as well stroll around. Once she entered Jade Chilim Pavilion, a cultivator immediately came to greet her. Senior, please come in, please come in. Even if it was a shop of the #1 cultivation group on North Pole Island, it was still very enthusiastic when it came to entertaining its guests. Mo Tiange heard that although the spirit veins on North Pole Island weren't bad, there weren't many spirit stone veins. So they were very dependent on trading with foreign cultivators. Only in this way could they obtain enough spirit stones for their own cultivation. What do you need, senior? Our shop has the most abundant beast cores on North Pole Island. No matter what beast core you want, as long as you say it, you'll most likely find it in our shop. In addition, we also have spiritual plants, magic tools, and the like. The one who rushed over to greet them enthusiastically was a mortal cultivator with a big smile on his face. Ian took a look at Emotienga's expression, then bowed to the man. Big brother, we'll take a look first. If we need anything, we'll call you. Okay, please take your time to look. The shop assistant was enthusiastic, but not overly so. After greeting them, he politely retreated. Emotienga thought in her heart that people from Yunzhong really knew how to do business. Not only did they make people feel that they were attentive, but they also weren't as sticky candy. Their enthusiasm was just right, making people feel very comfortable. She couldn't help but think that if the things were good, buying one or two wouldn't be bad. She looked around. This Jade Chilan pavilion was very big. It was densely packed with counters, and people were coming and going. All of them were low-level cultivators, who were talking to shop assistants in low voices. Fairy, the first floor sells low-level beast cores, which probably won't be interesting to you. The second floor sells middle-level beast cores. If you want a high-grade monster core, you can directly ask the shopkeeper here. However, if Fairy just wants to stroll around, it'd be better to go to the underground hall. That's the most distinctive place in Jade Chilan Pavilion. Underground hall. Emotienga asked with interest. How distinctive? Ian smiled. Fairy, you'll know once you take a look. Emotienga thought about it but didn't object. She nodded and said, lead the way. Ian curtsied and led her around those counters with familiarity. They entered a carved stone door and walked down the stone steps behind the door. Emotienga already sensed that there were a lot of people down there. When she reached the bottom and entered an open door, her eyes couldn't help but brighten. In front of her was a very spacious hall that could almost be called a public square. There were densely packed stalls inside, and countless cultivators and mortals were shuttling back and forth here. The sound of their conversations rang in her ears. This is, Ian smiled and said. This underground hall is Jade Chilan Pavilion's signature. This is a free market. There are no shops here, only customers. No matter what cultivation level they are, if they want to buy or sell, they can come here to take a look. Jade Chilan Pavilion doesn't charge any fees. Emotienga slowly swept her gaze over and said, that being the case, what's the difference between this place and the stalls outside? The difference is that Jade Chilan Pavilion has a treasure appraiser stationed here. If the buyer and the seller reach an agreement, they can look for the appraiser here to appraise the authenticity and quality of the item. If the transaction is successful, Jade Chilan Pavilion will take a 10% fee. If the item doesn't match the seller's description, and the transaction can't be concluded, they won't take a single cent. Oh! Emotienga finally understood. It's a bit safer for them to trade here, right? Yes. If the appraiser makes a mistake, Jade Chilan Pavilion will compensate them according to the price. What many cultivators fear the most when they come to North Pole Island to buy beast cores is to sell inferior ones as good ones. So they're willing to spend a bit more money to buy peace of mind. Chapter 348. Walking in the free market was an eye-opener for Emotienga. It was not because the things here were good, but because there were many kinds of monster cores. She had never heard of many monster cores. She thought they were the unique demonic beasts in Yunzhong. The cultivators doing business here ranged from the ore refining realm to the foundation building realm. She even saw 2 core formation cultivators. Most of the ore refining cultivators entering and exiting the place looked exhausted and unkempt. Baffled, Emotienga asked Ian, why do these ore refining cultivators look so dispirited? Ian answered, these cultivators are all hunting beasts here. Their cultivation levels are relatively low, so they can't hunt high-level demonic beasts. They can only kill first-rank demonic beasts. However, many first-rank demonic beasts don't even have a Yaodan. It's not easy to find a Yaodan, and the other materials of demonic beasts aren't worth much. At this point, Emotienga finally understood. These ore refining cultivators were the lowest level of the cultivators, who supported the beast core market on North Pole Island. They did the most tiring and dangerous work to obtain beast cores with great difficulty. They brought them to this free market to sell, and earn some spirit stones for their own cultivation. They were not businessmen but workers. In the past, when my father was still alive, he was also like this. Sometimes, when he came back from the sea, he would be so tired that he couldn't even stand steadily. But he still had to pull himself together and come out to sell Yao Coors. Ian suddenly said in a daze. Your father? Mo Tienga turned to look at her. Yes. Ian lowered her head and said softly. My father was also an immortal cultivator, but his spirit root wasn't good, and he has already passed away. After a moment of silence, Mo Tienga heaved a sigh and patted Mo Tienga's shoulder to comfort her. Ian revealed a smile. Thank you, Fairy, I'm fine. Father has already passed away for 2 years. I'm already used to it. She turned around, raised her hand, and pointed at a small door in the distance. She continued, that's where the Jade Chilan Pavilion's appraisers are located. Even if you don't want to trade, you can still find them to appraise your items. You just have to pay the appraisal fee. Mo Tienga looked up and saw that the small gate was filled with people coming and going. Most of them were buyers and sellers, but there were also some who were alone. She wasn't interested in the appraisal and looked away after a few glances. But a moment later, it turned back. No, she seemed to have seen something just now. Mo Tienga strode towards the appraisal room. Fairy. Startled, Ian followed. The small appraisal room was surrounded by several appraisers. Mo Tienga raised her head and looked around, but she didn't see the person she saw just now. Fairy, are you looking for someone? After searching for a while but finding nothing, Mo Tienga finally gave up. She squeezed out of the crowd and shook her head. Maybe I was mistaken. Oh, Ian cleverly didn't ask any more questions. After this incident, Mo Tienga lost interest in shopping. She said, there's nothing to see here. Let's go. Once they left the free market, Mo Tienga didn't want to stroll around anymore. She thought for a moment then said to Ian, I'm going to the seaside for a walk. It's not appropriate to take you with me. You should go back first. Yes. Ian responded, then thought for a moment and said, Fairy, when cultivators go to hunt beasts, most of them go through the northeast pier. The west area is where the major sects are located, so they might not receive guests. Okay, I got it. Hearing her reply, Ian curtsied, then turned around and left. Mo Tienga didn't stay there for long. She left the bazaar, flew into the air and flew east. As she flew, she thought about what happened just now. In that free market, she saw a woman dressed in black. That woman's back was very similar to Nia Wushang's. According to reason, the road from the eastern sea to the South Pole Island was very hidden. If she hadn't seen the jade slip Mo Yaoqing left behind, the possibility of her finding it was very low. But if she went through the South Sea, the distance from the celestial pole to Yunzhong wasn't only long, but it was also extremely dangerous. How could Nia Wushang, a core formation cultivator, get there? Could it be that that woman wasn't Nia Wushang, and she was mistaken? But that woman's back was too similar to Nia Wushang's, and the style of her clothes was also the same. Even if she might have mistaken her back, it was impossible for their clothes to be so similar, right? Mo Tienga knitted her brows and thought for a while, feeling full of questions. Besides, that woman's cultivation level was also in the foundation building realm, which didn't match. However, this wasn't certain. She could restrain her spiritual breath, so could others. She hadn't flown far when she suddenly felt several spiritual auras approaching her. Right now, she was pretending to be in the foundation building realm, so her flying speed was also very slow. These people were also in the foundation building realm. She didn't know what kind of flying magic tools they were using, but they unexpectedly caught up to her very quickly. Mo Tienga intended to give way. But who would have thought that those people would suddenly split up and flank her, completely surrounding her? Upon realizing this, she stopped and watched these cultivators approaching her with a frown. There were both men and women among them, and they all wore the same clothes. They seemed to be disciples of some cultivation group. Gentlemen, what's the matter? 3 early-stage foundation building cultivators and 2 middle-stage foundation building cultivators all had hostile expressions. Mo Tienga frowned. She was just passing by, and this place wasn't the location of the cultivation groups Ian mentioned. So why did these people come? Upon hearing what she said, These people exchanged glances with each other. The middle stage foundation building cultivator in the lead had a gloomy expression as he shouted, "Hand over the thing!" Emotinga's frown deepened. Her gaze slowly swept over the cultivators surrounding her and she said, "Gentlemen, you must have mistaken me for someone else, right?" Under her gaze, these cultivators couldn't help but cower. Those with low cultivation levels were even more startled, as if they were being suppressed by a high-level cultivator. However, although this female cultivator's cultivation level was higher than theirs, she was only in the foundation building realm. Once he calmed his mind, the leader once again put on a cold expression. "Mistaking you for someone else? Your accent is obviously the same as that little thief's, yet you still say you're mistaken." This person's tone was really unpleasant to hear. Moreover, without any explanation, he immediately identified her as a little thief, which made Emotinga even more unhappy. However, this wasn't the celestial pole, and she was a newcomer, so it was better for her to restrain herself a bit. With that thought in mind, she swallowed her anger and said slowly, "Gentlemen, are there any misunderstandings? I just left the Beast Core Market and was about to go to the pier when I was intercepted by you on the way. I really don't know why you're here." Upon hearing what she said, these people's expressions changed greatly. One of them shouted, "Sure enough, it's you. You still dare to quibble." Emotinga was stunned. Was there something wrong with what she said? "Your Excellency." The leader clenched the magic tool in his hand and said coldly, "You'd better obediently hand over the thing. Although you're in the late stage of the foundation building realm, you can't escape even if the 5 of us work together." These people were obsessed with who she was. Regardless of the reason, Emotinga was also annoyed. She said coldly, "This is the last time I'm telling you. If I say I'm not, then I'm not. If you want to fight, go ahead." "You." The leader's expression suddenly became unsightly. In the end, he clenched his teeth and signaled his companions with his eyes. Upon receiving his signal, the 5 of them moved almost at the same time. The 5 of them took out banners at the same time, and each of them unfolded them in the wind. In an instant, spiritual aura surged and a cold wind blew. Emotinga narrowed her eyes. With her cultivation level, she naturally wasn't afraid of these 5 foundation building cultivators. However, these 5 people's techniques were quite strange. It seemed to be a kind of formation that used people as a formation. She stared at the banners in their hands. The banners were painted with the Tai Chi 8 trigrams, as well as some strange pictures. Although she didn't understand them very well, she could roughly tell they were some formation diagrams. A thought flashed through her mind and she asked, "Are you people from Tianyin sect?" Upon hearing that, the leader snorted coldly. "No need to act. You just stole something from our Jade Chilan Pavilion. So why are you acting like you don't know us?" Emotinga had always been amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. This person's overbearing attitude made her unhappy, so she immediately flung her sleeves and released her momentum. "I really don't know. What are you going to do about it?" Once the momentum of a core formation cultivator was released, the 5 people's expressions changed greatly. One of them shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother, you're actually in the core formation realm." The leader's face turned pale and red. His attitude became a bit more restrained, but his gaze became more resolute. "Your Excellency is a core formation senior. So why are you pretending to be in the foundation building realm? Don't tell me you don't have designs on our Tianyin sect?" Emotinga said coldly. "I'll restrain my spiritual breath if I want to. Why should I explain myself to juniors like you? You're falsely accusing me of stealing something from you for no reason. So do you think I have to explain everything clearly to you? Even if your Tianyin sect is the biggest cultivation group on North Pole Island, this doesn't make sense." After her speech, the 5 people hesitated. If she was a foundation-building cultivator, they could just take her back and hand her over to the cultivation group to be dealt with. However, this female cultivator was in the core formation realm. They couldn't beat her, but they also couldn't let her go. After all, she was the most suspicious person on their way here. In fact, Tianyin sect was also used to being the dominant sect on North Pole Island, so they couldn't lower their face. Previously, they aggressively came to stop them, But now that they found out the other party was a core formation senior, wouldn't they be a joke if they retreated? Besides, those martial uncles in the cultivation group wouldn't care about their suffering and would only say they didn't do their job well. Senior, the leader finally softened his tone and said to Emotienga, "In fact, our Jade Chilan Pavilion lost an important item. If we don't do our job well, being punished when we go back is a small matter. But at that time, the whole North Pole Island will be in turmoil. This matter is of great importance, so I'd like to ask Senior to go back with us and explain it clearly to our sect." The corners of Emotienga's mouth rose, forming a smiling expression. She was a core formation cultivator, yet she was implicated in some matter for no reason, and was taken back by a few foundation-building cultivators. If word got out, wouldn't she become a laughing stock? Could it be that the people in Yunzhong all did things like this? Or was it because Tianyin sect was the most powerful here, so they were this arrogant? Gentlemen, if your sect elders asked me, I might agree. But with just the few of you, wouldn't it be ridiculous for me to obediently go back with you? Senior, the one who looked the youngest among the 5 people shouted, "Although we're foundation-building cultivators, we represent Tianyin sect. If you're unwilling to go back with us, we'll have to report this to our sect elders. At that time, I'm afraid you won't look good." Junior Marshal Brother Qiao. Once that person finished speaking, the leader immediately shouted. Unfortunately, he'd already said it. When he turned around, he saw that Emotienga's face was already covered in a layer of frost. "Good. Go back and report this to your sect elders." She raised her head and arrogantly glanced at the 5 people in front of her. "I'll wait for your sect elders to come and give me an explanation." Chapter 349. Emotienga flung her sleeves and left, and the 5 foundation-building cultivators didn't chase after her. "Senior Marshal Brother, what should we do?" the foundation-building cultivator asked anxiously. Although he was full of momentum just now that Emotienga flung her sleeves and left, he was worried. The leader frowned and said angrily, "How would I know?" Tianyin sect was indeed the biggest cultivation group on North Pole Island, but they were only foundation-building cultivators and didn't have high-level cultivator seniors. Even if they suffered losses in front of a core formation cultivator, no one would stand up for them. On the contrary, their masters and seniors would think they didn't do their job well. After all, they were the ones who offended the other party with their words first. Thinking of this senior marshal brother had a headache. "Forget it, let's go back first." In the end, he said, "The thing we lost this time is very important, so the martial uncles in the sect will definitely intervene. When we go back, we just need to report it honestly. At worst, we'll just be punished." Yes. The others were all dejected. It was already bad luck for them to lose something when they were in charge of guarding the place. They wanted to chase the person back to make up for their mistake, but they also caused this kind of trouble. With the sect head's strict management, they didn't know how heavy the punishment would be. Emotienga didn't mention these people. After flying for a while, she finally stopped. There was no anger on her face, only confusion. From the words of these foundation-building cultivators just now, she deduced what happened. Someone must have stolen some kind of treasure from the Jade Chilan Pavilion just now. They chased after the thief, only to discover that she was acting suspiciously, so they thought she was the thief who stole the treasure. This was interesting. Since they regarded her as the thief who stole the treasure, it showed that her figure and cultivation level were similar to the thief's. Moreover, the time when the treasure was stolen should be when she left Jade Chilan Pavilion. In addition, as soon as she spoke, these foundation-building cultivators said her accent was very similar to the thief's. She narrowed her eyes and remembered the figure she saw in Jade Chilan Pavilion that looked like Nia Wushang. Although Nia Wushang didn't look like her, their figures were similar if they didn't look at their faces. Moreover, at that time, her cultivation level also seemed to be in the foundation-building realm. Most importantly, if that person was really Nia Wushang, they were both from the celestial pole. So to the people in Yunzhong, their accents were indeed similar. Could it be that Nia Wushang really came to Yunzhong? Once she thought of this possibility, Imo felt the situation was far from good. If Nia Wushang came to Yunzhong, did she come alone or with her master, Master Songfeng? What exactly did she steal from the Jade Chilim Pavilion? From the looks of these 5 foundation building cultivators, she must have stolen something extraordinary. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so she presumably didn't lack spirit stones. If she could buy it, why did she have to steal it? Imo rubbed her forehead. She had a terrible headache. Why was she so unlucky? He was walking on his own path, and did not meddle in other people's business, yet he was dragged into a quarrel again. Regardless of whether her guess was right or not, whether that person was Nia Wushang or not, she was already inevitably dragged into this matter. Just now, he didn't treat those foundation establishment cultivators nicely because of their arrogant attitude. The rule of the cultivation world was that the strong were respected. She was a core formation cultivator, so berating several foundation building cultivators naturally wasn't a problem. Even if these people were disciples of Tianyin sect, the number 1 cultivation group on North Pole Island, it was still the same. However, that was all he could do. She was now on North Pole Island. As long as these people reported this matter, her whereabouts should be found very quickly. Due to her identity as a core formation cultivator, Tianyin sect's core formation cultivators would come out. At that time, she couldn't not give them any face like she did now. In any case, a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Besides, Tianyin sect had 2 nascent soul cultivators, so she couldn't really fall out with them. She originally wanted to go to the docks to see how Yunzhong's cultivators hunted sea beasts, and chat with them to learn more about Yunzhong. But now, she was no longer in the mood, so she took a detour and simply went back to the inn. Ian was astonished to see her coming back so quickly. She had just arrived, but this fairy already came back. Sure enough, she was a powerful cultivator. Imo didn't feel like explaining to her. Before she went back to the cultivation room, she told her, "In the next few days, if I have visitors, just call me directly in the courtyard." Ian was baffled. This fairy had lived here for more than half a month, and hadn't even left the door. No matter how she looked at it, she didn't look like she was visiting a friend. This time, she just went out for a trip, but she mentioned visitors. Ian really didn't understand what was going on. However, she was only a maid hired by the inn to serve cultivators, so she wasn't qualified to ask why, so she just answered, yes. Imo furrowed her brows, stepped into the cultivation room, opened the defensive formation, and entered the virtual sky world. Inside the virtual sky world, everything was normal. Feifei and Xiaohua were playing, and Xiaofan was cultivating in the stream. Compared to those two, Xiaofan not only had human-like intelligence, but its behavior was also more human-like. Although it was still a child among demonic beasts, it was very fanatical about cultivation. After entering the virtual sky world, it was even more like a fish in water. At this thought, Emotinga's mind wandered. She wasn't very used to the environment of the virtual sky world, but her 3 spiritual beasts didn't have this problem. Perhaps it was because demonic beasts' cultivation method was closer to instinct. Unfortunately, she couldn't use demonic beasts' cultivation method for reference. Otherwise, she and she wouldn't have to be separated. The people from Tianyin sect came faster than she expected. In less than half a day, while Emotinga was meditating inside the virtual sky world with her eyes closed, she heard Ian's voice from outside, telling her that there was a visitor. Emotinga sighed, opened her eyes, and used her divine sense to order Xiaofan and Xiaohua to come over. "Master, is something the matter?" Emotinga stroked Xiaohua, who had thrown itself into her arms, then said to the 2 beasts, "It might be a bit troublesome. You 2 go into the spiritual beast bag first and follow me out." Oh, Xiaofan didn't ask anything. Seeing Emotinga open the spiritual beast bag, it very consciously went inside. Xiaohua, on the other hand, rolled several times unhappily before reluctantly entering the spiritual beast bag. Emotinga put away the 2 spiritual beast bags, and made sure all her magic weapons were in the most suitable places, ready to fight at any time. She didn't stay any longer. She went out of the virtual sky world, opened the restriction and walked out. Fairy. Upon seeing her, Ian stepped forward and bowed. The guest is waiting in the hall. Emotienga nodded with a smile, then walked towards the small reception hall. Ian was well trained, so she had already invited the guest into the hall and served them good tea. Right now, the person sitting in the hall was an early-stage core formation female cultivator. She had a head full of pearls and jade, and her clothes were layered with ornaments, looking incomparably gorgeous. Just by looking at her back, one would feel she had a threatening air of nobility. Emotienga couldn't help but think of her master, Lord Taoist Jinghe. This style was really similar to her master's. If Lord Taoist Jinghe had the style of an incapable ruler, then this female cultivator had the style of an empress. This female cultivator was leisurely drinking tea. When she sensed someone coming, she put down the teacup unhurriedly and raised her head to meet Emotienga's gaze. At that moment, Emotienga couldn't help but be stunned. This female cultivator was beautiful. She had a threatening air of immortality and was also noble and elegant. She was the kind of beauty Emotienga had never seen in the cultivation world. Compared with those fairies who looked as elegant as immortals, but were in fact vulgar. Although this female cultivator had secular magnificence, her temperament was even more detached from the secular world. Upon seeing Emotienga, this female cultivator stood up and bowed to greet her. I'm a cultivator from Tianyin sect. My Taoist name is Chizu. Outsiders call me Madam Chizu out of courtesy. Greetings to fellow Taoist. Emotienga bowed to return the greeting. Fellow Taoist Chizu is too polite. My surname is Mo, and my first name is Qingwei. So it's fellow Taoist Qingwei. Madam Chizu smiled and praised her neither hurriedly nor slowly. Fellow Taoist Qingwei looks so young, but your cultivation level is already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. It's really shocking. Isn't fellow Taoist Chizu also young and beautiful? Why must you make fun of me? Emotienga said faintly, then called out to Madam Chizu. Fellow Taoist, please sit. Madam Chizu sat down with a smile, then picked up her teacup again. The two of them took the opportunity to drink tea, while secretly sizing each other up. Emotienga could see that although this Madam Chizu was only in the early stage of the core formation realm, her status in Tianyin sect shouldn't be low. She had a graceful temperament, her every movement was calm and composed, and there was an indistinct might around her. Ordinary core formation cultivators didn't have this kind of might. Presumably, she held power in the sect to have this kind of momentum. While Emotienga was sizing the other party up, Madam Chizu was also looking at her. When she first saw Emotienga, astonishment flitted across her eyes. Although many of the high-level female cultivators in the immortal cultivation world retained their youthful beauty, in the eyes of experienced people, they would still be able to see the subtle differences. However, this core formation female cultivator she'd never seen on North Pole Island seemed to be very young. Suspicion arose in Madame Chizu's heart. Could it be that she was a disciple of some big cultivation group on the mainland? With that thought in mind, Madame Chizu's eyes flickered. She asked with a smile, Fellow Taoist Qingwei, may I know where you're from and why did you come to North Pole Island? For cultivators, such a direct question was rather impolite. But when Madame Chizu said it with such a tone and expression, it made people feel that it was only natural. Emotienga put down her teacup, then said with a smile, Forgive me, fellow Taoist. I can't tell you my background in detail, but my purpose for coming here is ordinary. I just went out to travel and came here. Oh, Madame Chizu raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, Fellow Taoist, you're just traveling and not here to buy beast cores? Emotienga answered calmly, If I see suitable beast cores, I'll naturally buy them. However, it doesn't matter if I can't buy them. Upon hearing her answer, Madame Chizu smiled. This kind of behavior was indeed like that of a cultivator from a big cultivation group. Only people like them wouldn't take a huge beast core market like North Pole Island seriously. With that thought in mind, Madame Chizu said slowly, Fellow Taoist Qingwei, I heard from the innkeeper just now that you claim to be an individual cultivator, and even suppressed your cultivation level, pretending to be a foundation-building cultivator. May I know if there's any trouble you can't talk about? Emotienga smiled faintly. She stared at Madame Chizu, but didn't say anything. Under Emotienga's gaze, Madame Chizu gradually felt that her question was a bit inappropriate. Since it was a trouble she couldn't talk about, how could she talk about it to an outsider? Fellow Taoist Chizu, Emotinga said. I don't like to be ostentatious, and I also don't like to talk about my master's background. I don't need to explain this to you, do I? Although Emotinga's current expression was smiling, how could a smart person like Madame Chizu not sense the warning in Emotinga's words? This thought immediately emerged in Madame Chizu's mind that this woman wasn't someone to be trifled with. Madame Chizu was about to speak, but Emotinga raised her hand to stop her. She dusted off her sleeves then said calmly, I know fellow Taoist's purpose for coming here. Since fellow Taoist treats me politely, and I'm not ungrateful, I'll explain it clearly to your group. Chapter 350. A smile soon appeared on Madame Chizu's face. She said earnestly, I'm extremely honored that fellow Taoist Qingwei can understand. Just now, my sect's disciples were incompetent and offended fellow Taoist. I apologize on their behalf. As she said this, Madame Chizu stood up and bowed cautiously. Upon seeing this, a smile appeared on Emotinga's face, and she made a gesture to help him up. Fellow Taoist, you're too polite. It's just a junior's impetuous behavior. There's no need to be like this. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. They were very satisfied with each other's tactfulness. Tianyin sect was the largest cultivation group on North Pole Island, so Emotinga naturally didn't want to offend them. Since the other party had expressed goodwill, she naturally took advantage of the situation. Madame Chizu, on the other hand, thought that since this female cultivator was young and had a profound cultivation level, it was very likely that she was a disciple of a large sect, so it would be better to rope her in. Those who had cultivated to the core formation realm were at least somewhat clever, even if they didn't have great wisdom. Nobody wanted to make enemies out of nothing. The two of them had a tacit understanding and sat down to drink tea again. Emotinga smiled and said, In fact, I'm also confused about this matter. Today, I indeed went to the Monster Core Market, and also entered your Tianyin sect's Jade Qilin Pavilion. However, I only looked around for a while before leaving. The maidservants outside could testify to this. It was my first time on North Pole Island, so I wanted to go to the docks to see how the cultivators here hunted beasts. Who knew that when I was halfway there, I'd be stopped by several foundation-building cultivators from your sect. In terms of time, I was only separated from the maidservant for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. There's simply no time for me to steal the goods of your esteemed sect. Fellow Taoist Chizu can verify this. Madame Chizu nodded as she listened. By the time Madame Chizu finished speaking, she already smiled and said, Since fellow Taoist Qingwei already explained it clearly, I naturally believe you. It's those kids from my sect who don't know how to do things and have disturbed you. I'm really sorry. Emotinga smiled faintly. Tianyin sect found this place so quickly, so her whereabouts should have been investigated long ago. However, in the end, she was a core formation cultivator. So a cultivator in the same realm as her had to meet her to completely eliminate suspicion. Since this Madame Chizu believed her the moment she heard what she said, then this matter could be considered to be over. Since it's a misunderstanding, let's just talk about it. Fellow Taoist Chizu, you don't have to worry about it. Emotinga paused for a moment then asked after some deliberation. Fellow Taoist Chizu, logically speaking, this matter is your group's secret. I'm an outsider, so I shouldn't ask too much. However, since this matter involves me, I would like to ask, how is that little thief similar to me, causing your sect's disciples to misunderstand me as a thief? I wonder if fellow Taoists can tell me? Madame Chizu muttered to herself for a moment then said, Fellow Taoist Qingwei, this matter involves my group's internal affairs, so please forgive me for not being able to tell you in detail. However, I can answer fellow Taoist's question. According to the disciples of my sect, that thief is a foundation establishment female cultivator. Whether it's her figure or her cultivation level, both match fellow Taoists. Most importantly, fellow Taoist's accent is exactly the same as that person's. Even if they aren't the same person, they should be from the same hometown. I see. Emotinga's expression didn't change as she nodded faintly. Seeing that Emotinga's expression didn't change, Madame Chizu pondered for a moment. In the end, she stood up and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Qingwei, my humble sect still has a lot of chores to take care of. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, I should also take my leave. I'm very sorry for disturbing you this time. If fellow Taoist Qingwei is still on North Pole Island, I'll invite you to a gathering again." Fellow Taoist Chizu is too polite. Emotinga also stood up. "Since fellow Taoist has something to do, I won't say much. I hope we'll have a chance to meet again in the future." Madame Chizu smiled and curtsied. "I hope so." After seeing Madame Chizu off, Emotinga returned to the small hall, and her expression immediately darkened. In Jade Chilim Pavilion, she saw a figure similar to Nie Wushang, who seemed to be in the foundation building realm. Jade Chilim Pavilion was robbed at that time. The thief's cultivation level and figure were similar. Tianyin sect's disciples said her accent was also similar to that person's. In the whole of North Pole Island, and even in Yunzhong, aside from people who also came from the celestial pole, who else would have a similar accent as her? With so many coincidences coming together, the answer was already on the verge of being revealed. Nie Wushang. She wasn't mistaken. That person was indeed Nie Wushang. In this way, it triggered another fatal speculation. Did Nie Wushang come alone, or with Master Songfeng? Thinking of this possibility, Emotinga's face turned pale. She wasn't afraid of rushing into Yunzhong alone. In any case, she was a core formation cultivator now, so she was confident that she could already hold her own with her own abilities. But if she really ran into Master Songfeng here, it would be a disaster. She had lived for more than 100 years, and met many nascent soul cultivators, but only this Master Songfeng made her feel fear from the bottom of her heart. Because of this person, she almost experienced the most terrifying thing a woman could do. This made her realize that her strength was far from enough. Only by standing at the top of the cultivators could she guarantee that she wouldn't get hurt. If she had the chance, she wished she could grind this person's bones and scatter his ashes. But now her strength wasn't enough. If she ran into Master Songfeng again, she might not be so lucky. "Fairy." Ayan's trembling voice rang in her ears. Emotinga turned around, put away her gloomy expression and asked faintly, "What's wrong?" Ayan hesitated for a long time, then asked cautiously, "Fairy, you haven't offended Tianyin sect, right?" Emotinga frowned. "Did your shopkeeper ask me to ask?" Ayan shook her head. "I just want to remind Fairy that Tianyin sect has 2 nascent soul cultivators, so it's fully deserving of being the #1 sect on North Pole Island. If Fairy has any conflicts with them, it'd be best for you to endure it." Upon seeing her worried expression, Emotinga felt warmth in her heart. She smiled and said, "It's all right. I don't have any conflicts with them." Ayan heaved a sigh of relief and touched her chest. "That's good. Fairy is an amiable person. I don't want Fairy to suffer losses here." Hearing what she said, Emotinga smiled. "Thank you." Before long, the inn's shopkeeper Dong hurried over and respectfully apologized to Emotinga. As it turned out, when Madame Chizu came to visit, he already knew that Emotinga was a core formation cultivator. He felt that his hospitality wasn't satisfactory and didn't match her status as a core formation cultivator. So he especially came to ask Emotinga if she needed anything. Emotinga deliberately lowered her cultivation level, so she naturally didn't have any other opinions. She just expressed that she didn't need anything, and that things were fine as they were, then sent shopkeeper Dong away. After shopkeeper Dong left, she told Ayan that she wouldn't go out during this period of time, and that if anyone came to visit, she should just decline and not disturb them. Soon after, she returned to the cultivation room, opened the defensive formation, and entered the virtual sky world. Just a moment ago, she thought of another possibility. People came and went in the Beast Core market, and there were many cultivators leaving at every moment. How did those 5 foundation building cultivators catch up with her so coincidentally? Even if there weren't many female foundation building cultivators, and there were even fewer who had a similar figure to Nie Wushang, it was still impossible for them to target her so quickly, right? Thinking about it this way, It was very likely that Nie Wuxiang left in the same direction as her. So when those foundation-building cultivators saw her, they naturally regarded her as a thief. In that case, another problem arose. If Nie Wuxiang really went in the same direction as her, was it possible that she discovered her? Thinking one step further, was it possible that Nie Wuxiang discovered her and deliberately led the pursuers to her? Mo Tiange was drenched in cold sweat. She didn't dare to think about it anymore. She calmed herself down and thought about it carefully again. Although this was only her conjecture, it was still a possibility. Her divine sense was powerful, but Nie Wuxiang was Master Songfeng's disciple after all. Who knew if she had some strange method to hide her breath from her? After thinking for a long time, Mo Tiange exhaled. Since she already had a guess, she had to think of a countermeasure. She didn't have any hatred for Nie Wuxiang. Back on Demonic Mountain, although it was she who led the way for Master Songfeng, she was his disciple after all, so what she did was understandable. As for later, Nie Wuxiang saved her, so she was a bit grateful. In any case, Nie Wuxiang helped her avoid a terrible experience. However, she was the one who brought Master Songfeng here, and Nie Wuxiang's identity was very sensitive. Although Mo Tiange felt a bit grateful, she never thought about repaying her or doing anything else. She just thought that if she could avoid Nie Wuxiang in the future, she shouldn't be enemies with Nie Wuxiang, which could also be considered repaying her. Now that Nie Wuxiang might appear here and plot against her, Mo Tiange became even more cautious. Although that was what she thought, she didn't think Nie Wuxiang thought the same. After all, Nie Wuxiang's identity was there. With Master Songfeng here, they were enemies. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange already made a decision. Whether Master Songfeng was here or not, she didn't want to get involved in this matter. Since she already explained it to Tianyan sect, she'd just pretend she didn't know and stay out of it. She had the virtual sky world. As long as she hid and didn't go out, neither Tianyan sect nor Master Songfeng could find her. Mo Tiange smiled, opened the spiritual beast bag, and released Xiaohua and Xiaofan. It's all right. You can go play. Xiaohua barked cheerfully and immediately ran away, probably to find Feifei to continue playing. Xiaofan, however, didn't move. She floated in the air and said with some worry, "Master, are you worried?" Mo Tiange was stunned. Xiaofan said, "The space between your eyebrows is wrinkled. Is there some trouble?" Mo Tiange was stunned for a moment, then smiled. "It's nothing, although it's a bit troublesome. As long as we don't go out, we'll be fine." "Oh." Xiaofan nodded, not really understanding. "Then are we going to stay here for a long time?" Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. "We can stay out of it if we don't go out. Let's stay here for a month first. You just need to cultivate. If something happens, I'll call you." "Okay," she said. Xiaofan didn't have any questions and said, "Then I'll go back to cultivate." "Go." Xiaofan went back to the brook to continue cultivating, while Xiaohua and Feifei were still rolling around and playing. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then took out the 2 stone sculpture puppets and ordered them to take care of the medicinal fields. She took advantage of this time to take out the magic weapons she got from Mo Yaoqing's cave. Spirit Guiding Bead, 8 trigrams Diagram of Tai Chi, Lotus Umbrella, Spirit Clouds Rui, and Land Shrinking Ruler. Among these 5 things, the Spirit Guiding Bead, 8 trigrams Diagram of Tai Chi, and Lotus Umbrella were all auxiliary objects that didn't need to be deliberately refined. The other 2, however, needed to be refined before they could display their greater power. There was no need to mention Spirit Clouds Rui. This was the magic weapon Mo Yaoqing used in fights of magical powers. Mo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, so if she refined this treasure well, it would be very helpful for her in Yunzhong. In addition, she also had to pay attention to the Land Shrinking Ruler. After advancing to the core formation realm, she couldn't rely on the virtual sky world as a life-saving means. 4 high-level cultivators entering the virtual sky world for a few breaths could determine life and death, so she must have another life-saving means. It was better to take advantage of this time to refine these 2 magic weapons. If something happened, they would come in handy. Chapter 351. Another half a month passed by. During this half a month, Emotienga didn't go out. She just quietly cultivated in the virtual sky world and refined her magic weapons. The cultivators from Tianyan sect didn't come again, and Ayan also didn't disturb her. This made her sigh of relief, but at the same time, she felt a bit worried. Was that person Ye Wushang? Did Master Songfeng come to Yunzhong with her? What happened between her and Tianyan sect? She really wanted to know about these things, but it was inconvenient to ask in the current situation. So she could only suppress her curiosity and continue to refine her magic weapons. While she was concentrating on refining, she suddenly heard Ayan's anxious voice. Fairy, fairy. Emotienga opened her eyes, stopped breathing, put away her magic weapons, and came out of the virtual sky world. What's the matter? It was dark outside, so Ayan didn't dare to enter the house. She reported in the courtyard. Fairy, someone wants to see you. Emotienga focused her mind, and since there were other cultivators in the small courtyard, an early-stage core formation cultivator, and 2 foundation-building cultivators. After thinking for a while, she removed the restriction and stepped out of the house. The core formation cultivator waiting in the courtyard was unexpectedly Madame Chizu. Upon seeing her coming out, Madame Chizu smiled and bowed to greet her. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, I'm here to disturb you again. Emotienga was a bit surprised, but she calmly returned the greeting and asked, Fellow Taoist, is there something important for you to visit so late at night? Madame Chizu frowned and forced a smile. There's indeed something. May I ask if fellow Taoist Qingwei knows the female cultivator who lives nearby? The fairy, who lived in another small courtyard shopkeeper Dong mentioned? Emotienga shook her head. To be honest, fellow Taoist Chizu, I haven't met any cultivators since I came to North Pole Island, and I haven't left the house for the past half a month. Really? The expression on Madame Chizu's face was very strange. She heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she looked even more worried. She thought for a while and asked again. Then these past few days, did fellow Taoist's divine sense discover any traces of other cultivators? This question made Emotienga raise her eyebrows. Fellow Taoist Chizu, you should know that cultivators keep their distance from each other. Since it's someone else's residence over there, of course, I won't use my divine sense to investigate. This was an unwritten rule between cultivators. Cultivators had a very strong sense of self-protection. A place like a cave residence was absolutely not allowed to be invaded by outsiders. If others used their divine sense to investigate, they would most likely be regarded as a person with ulterior motives. Realizing that her question was somewhat inappropriate, Madame Chizu was startled for a moment before she revealed a smile and said apologetically, I'm sorry, my words were inappropriate. To tell you the truth, we've been investigating for half a month and have already found out the identity of the thief. It just so happens that he lives in the courtyard closest to you. But when we arrived, we couldn't find him. I remembered that fellow Taoist Qingwei happened to be nearby, so I came to ask. Emotienga was dumbfounded. Such a coincidence. Isn't that so? When I first heard the news, I also didn't dare to believe it. Madame Chizu's gaze was fixed on her. Although she had a smile on her face, her expression was somewhat nervous. Emotienga smiled bitterly in her heart. Perhaps this Madame Chizu was worried that she was also an accomplice. That person stole something from Tianyan sect, and she just happened to go to Jade Chilim Pavilion. Furthermore, her figure and accent were similar. After she clarified the matter, it turned out that that person also happened to live near her. With so many coincidences, how could she not suspect her? Thinking up to this point, Emotienga sighed. Fellow Taoist Chizu, was that person also a core formation cultivator? Madame Chizu nodded. Yes. Her gaze shifted and she said, because the stolen item is precious, our sect's nascent soul seniors have already set out. Presumably, they'll be able to retrieve it in a few days. Upon hearing her answer, Emotienga said faintly, then I wish your sect will be able to successfully retrieve the lost item. After saying that, the two of them were somewhat speechless. After standing for a while, Madame Chizu finally smiled and took her leave. Since fellow Taoist didn't see it, I'll take my leave. I'm deeply sorry for disturbing you so late at night. Emo Tienga showed a faint smile. No problem. Fellow Taoist Chizu doesn't need to be polite. I still have something to do, so I won't be seeing you off. Madame Chizu nodded with a smile, then turned around and left with the two foundation-building disciples. When they were far away and there were no longer any traces of cultivators around, Emo Tienga turned around and said, Ian, everything's fine now. You can go back and rest. Yes, Ian answered. She watched as Emo Tienga turned around and entered the cultivation room. Then she also returned to her small side room. Once she entered the cultivation room, Emo Tienga immediately started to cast the restriction. Her gaze shifted to a corner. Come out. Shortly after she spoke, a shadow slowly appeared in the corner. That shadow became clearer and clearer until finally, a person appeared. The person was dressed in black and had a delicate and pretty face. It was Nia Wushang. You can actually find me? Nia Wushang's voice was low and hoarse. Emo Tienga smiled. She sat down at the table and poured 2 cups of tea. It's been many years since we last met. Fellow Taoist Nia, we're really fated. Nia Wushang frowned but didn't answer. Instead, she walked towards Emo Tienga and sat across from her. How did you find me? Emo Tienga stared at her. Her gaze swept around the room, and she said with a faint smile, Not only did you enter this courtyard, but you also entered my room. I laid my own unique formation in this room. Although your concealment technique is brilliant, I can still find you. I see. Nia Wushang nodded, then picked up the teacup and took a sip. Emo Tienga's gaze flickered. She didn't quite understand what Nia Wushang meant. Hiding in her room without telling her seemed to be an offense. But Nia Wushang still dared to come in, even though she knew there was a restriction here, and drank the tea she poured without any wariness. This Nia Wushang seemed to be certain that she wouldn't harm her. Fellow Taoist Nia, Emo Tienga said after a long time. How did you come to Yunzhong? And why did you steal Tianyan sex things? Nia Wushang looked up and slightly raised the corners of her mouth. She said, In fact, you want to ask whether my master also came or not, right? Emo Tienga paused for a moment, then smiled. Do you still need to ask? You stole Tianyan sex things and hid in my place, so your master definitely isn't with you. Nia Wushang was stunned. She lowered her eyes and held the teacup without saying anything. Emo Tienga felt the situation before her was a bit strange. She and Nia Wushang's respective masters had great enmity. There was kindness and enmity between them, but the two of them met in Yunzhong, thousands of miles away from the celestial pole. If that was all, it wouldn't be a big deal. But now, Nia Wushang stole something from the number 1 sect on North Pole Island and hid in her place, seemingly without any wariness. Why didn't she remember her relationship with Nia Wushang being so good? In any case, Nia Wushang was well aware that she was inside the formation and restriction, but she was still so calm. So she probably didn't have any hostility. Just as Emo Tienga was thinking, Nia Wushang stopped contemplating, looked up, and asked, Fellow Taoist Emo, how did you come to Yunzhong? Where's your husband? Did he come with you? Emo Tienga was stunned. You know, I have a Taoist partner? Nia Wushang's lips curved into a smile. Fellow Taoist Emo, don't underestimate the fame of the two of you. Your husband formed his nascent soul in his early 200 years, and is in the limelight in the celestial pole. As for you, you're also a genius who formed your gold core before turning 100 years old. The news of the two of you cultivating as dual cultivators has pretty much spread in the celestial pole. As long as I pay attention, I'll naturally find out. Emo Tienga really didn't expect it. Forget about Qin Shi. At least she didn't think she was that famous. However, Nia Wushang mentioning this made her notice another thing. Fellow Taoist Nia, my dual cultivation only took 3 to 5 years. Did you also arrive in Yunzhong recently? Nia Wushang nodded and cast a sidelong glance at her. Fellow Taoist Emo, I was the one who asked you just now. Emo Tienga smiled. In the beginning, I was the one who asked fellow Taoist Nia how you came to Yunzhong. But fellow Taoist Nia also didn't answer. The two of them stared at each other. After staring for a while, they both felt a bit bored, so they withdrew their gazes and sighed. Their sighs were of the same mind. The two of them were stunned. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. With such a smile, the two of them imperceptibly became a bit closer. Those messy grievances were also temporarily thrown to the back of their minds. All right, I'll answer first, Nie Wuxiang said. Nie Wuxiang said, I got a treasure from my master. With the help of this treasure, I was able to safely cross the South Sea, but I went in the wrong direction and drifted to North Pole Island. She then looked at Emo Tienga. What about you? How did you come to Yunzhong? I don't see your husband. Don't tell me you're also alone? Emo Tienga answered, Yes, I'm indeed alone. Originally, I just broke through to the middle stage of the core formation realm, so I went out to travel. Later, I accidentally found a path, so I came to Yunzhong. The two of them spoke vaguely. After all, their relationship was complicated, so some things didn't need to be explained too clearly. After giving a brief explanation, Emo Tienga asked, Fellow Taoist Nie, you stole something from Tianyin sect, and then hid in my place. What's the meaning of this? What? You don't want me to hide? Nie Wuxiang asked instead of answering. Emo Tienga was dumbfounded. She then shook her head. I don't want to meddle in your business, nor do I want to catch thieves for Tianyin sect. Where you are has nothing to do with me. Upon hearing that, Nie Wuxiang smiled. That being the case, why do you have to ask? Emo Tienga frowned and said, Fellow Taoist Nie, you're now in my cultivation room. If I don't ask, how can I continue living here? Nie Wuxiang thought for a moment then nodded. What you said makes sense. Alright, let's talk about our relationship first. Emo Tienga always felt that the Nie Wuxiang in front of her was different from the one she met on Demonic Mountain, and even more different from the one she met at the sect more than 60 years ago. Although the previous Nie Wuxiang had a delicate appearance, she looked vicious and had a strange character. However, the one in front of her was obviously a lot more relaxed, and her whole body was full of a kind of lively aura. Perhaps it was because she left Master Song Feng? She couldn't help but have this thought. This wasn't impossible. When they met on Demonic Mountain, Nie Wuxiang's behavior was very clear. Master Song Feng beat and scolded this disciple at every turn, and Nie Wuxiang also revealed feelings of fear and hatred towards her master. Thinking up to this point, Emo Tienga's mind was moved. Nie Wuxiang just said she obtained a treasure from Master Song Feng, which was why she could leave the celestial pole and come to Yunzhong. This sounded a bit strange. To be able to cross the South Sea by relying on this treasure must have great magical powers. Based on Master Song Feng's attitude towards her, it was impossible for him to give her such a magic treasure, right? Was it possible that she stole Master Song Feng's magic treasure and secretly escaped? Chapter 352. Seeing Emo Tienga staring at her like that, Nie Wuxiang was bewildered and looked down at herself. What's wrong? Emo Tienga smiled and went straight to the point. Did you escape? Nie Wuxiang's expression darkened in an instant, and she clenched her fists. Emo Tienga glanced at her hand and said, Don't forget you were in my formation. Nie Wuxiang was startled and relaxed. After a while she finally said, Yes, I betrayed my master, stole his treasured magic weapon and fled the celestial pole. At this point, she stared at Emo Tienga. Are you happy now? After confirming her guess, Emo Tienga finally felt like a huge rock had been lifted from her heart. The enmity between her and Nie Wuxiang was because of Master Song Feng. If she left Master Song Feng, the two of them wouldn't be enemies. She smiled and looked at Nie Wuxiang. Yes, I'm very happy. Aren't you happy? Such calmness stunned Nie Wuxiang. She stared at Emo Tienga with complicated feelings. She remembered the first time she saw her. She was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. As Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple, she received female guests at Lord Taoist Xuanin's soul formation ceremony. At that time, she knew her master was going to Xianqing school to cause trouble for Lord Taoist Jinghe. So she paid special attention to this Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. She thought she was obviously a proud child, but she had to pretend to be indifferent, which made people hate her. She admitted she was jealous at that time, and because of that, she couldn't help but hate her. The next time she met her was several decades later. At that time, she had just advanced to the core formation realm and followed her master to Demonic Mountain. At that time, Master Taoist Qingwei already had a small reputation. When she traveled around Kunwu, she occasionally heard people talk about how Lord Taoist Jinghe of Xianqing School accepted another genius disciple, who advanced to the core formation realm within 100 years. Her initial jealousy was gradually forgotten after several decades, but when she met her again, she still couldn't control herself from hating her. Why was she so lucky as a woman? She had a master who loved his disciple as much as his own life, and a senior martial brother, who cherished her so much. As for herself, she had nothing. Seeing how perfect she was, she hated herself for her imperfections. However, when her master wanted to destroy this perfection, and let the three of them taste the disgusting taste of swallowing a fly, she couldn't bear it anymore. Therefore, she tampered with the order, and even went back to stop it when her master was rushing to Jade Palace. She couldn't figure out why she would do that. Perhaps it was because of her perfection that he had a longing for her, so he couldn't bear to destroy her? Or perhaps as a woman, such a thing was too cruel, so cruel that even she couldn't accept it. It was no longer necessary to investigate the reason. By the time she reacted, she had already done so. Then, when her master went to Jade Palace, she left Demonic Mountain almost as if she was fleeing for her life. She was very afraid. She was afraid of how her master would punish her if he knew that she had done such a thing. Would he be so angry that he would slap her to death? Or should he trap her in the original devil pool and make her suffer a fate worse than death? But even though she was so scared that she could hardly control herself, she never regretted it. Who would have thought that a change would occur on Demonic Mountain, and she would escape a calamity instead? Although her master fled in disarray, he was seriously injured and didn't know what she had done. In the following 10 years, her master had been in closed-door meditation to heal his injuries, and had no time to pay attention to her. She was relieved for the time being, but she was still concerned about this matter. Her master would find out sooner or later. When he found out, she would be lucky if she could be slapped to death by him. She didn't want to die and wanted to live a better life, so her desire to escape became more and more urgent day by day. Her master was seriously injured, and had no time to care about her. Was there a better time than now? She planned for a long time and finally made up her mind. She decided to go all the way and steal her master's magic weapon, while he was healing his injuries, and fled the celestial pole. From that moment on, she had no late-stage nascent soul master and no backer. However, she had freedom, the freedom she yearned for day and night. Crossing the South Sea and escaping from the celestial pole was a dangerous move for her. She knew better than anyone else about her master's vengeful personality. Since she had betrayed her master, there was no way out. If she was caught by him, she would be in a state worse than death. That being the case, she might as well risk it. Even if she died in the South Sea, it would be better than the rest of her life. Fortunately, after letting her down for more than 100 years, God finally gave her hope this time, allowing her to cross the South Sea and safely arrive at Yunzhong's North Pole Island. But she never expected that she would meet Master Taoist Qingwei here again. Before leaving the Celestial Pole, she learned that her senior martial brother had succeeded in forming his nascent soul, and the two of them had become dual cultivation Tao companions. According to reason, shouldn't they be inseparable at this time? Why were they separated, and came to Yunzhong thousands of miles away by themselves? She felt very confused. She suddenly realized she couldn't understand this, God's favored one. Emotinga raised her eyebrows and asked, "What's wrong?" She didn't speak for a long time. Nia Wushang withdrew her gaze and said faintly, "Nothing. I just suddenly realized I don't seem to understand you." Emotinga frowned. She didn't quite understand what Nia Wushang meant. In the next moment, Nia Wushang smiled. "Forget it. Let's not talk about these things. Let's continue to discuss our relationship." Emotinga waved her hand. "Since you've left your master, even if we're not friends, we won't be enemies. Of course, as long as you're not hostile." Nia Wushang stared at her, her gaze becoming complicated again. "You? Oh, you also saved me." She smiled. "In any case, you were the one who stopped that matter in the end. I didn't have a chance back then, so I have to thank you now." Nia Wushang's gaze moved. It could be said that the reason she was sitting here today was directly caused by this matter. If she hadn't saved Emotienga, she wouldn't have chosen to escape out of fear of her master's punishment, and she wouldn't have taken the risk to cross the South Sea and come to North Pole Island. Why are you thanking me? If I hadn't taken master there, you wouldn't have. Emotienga just smiled. Not long after you left, you brought your master back. Presumably your master was nearby, right? With his divine sense as the first late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole, I'm afraid he'd have discovered us long ago. Of course, it's not that I don't care at all. It's just that the enmity between you and me is all because of your master. Since you've already left him, there's no need to mention it again. Nie Wushang's expression was complicated. She stared at her for a long time before she finally said, "That day, it wasn't me who took my master there. As soon as we came out of the fog, we were discovered by him." Emotienga wasn't surprised to hear this. She just nodded lightly. "I see." Judging from Nie Wushang's attitude this time, Emotienga already guessed that Nie Wushang wasn't hostile towards her. That was for the best. Emotienga didn't want to be enemies with Nie Wushang. The two of them were silent for a long time before Emotienga asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" Nie Wushang shook her head, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You don't have to worry about Tianyan sect implicating you. I don't think they can discover me, even if they're nascent soul cultivators." "You're that confident?" Emotienga was a bit surprised. In fact, she wasn't afraid of being implicated. Her unique formation wasn't a common one. Even a nascent soul cultivator's divine sense would be blocked outside. Nie Wushang curled her lips into a proud smile. "My concealment technique has never failed. Otherwise, how could I dare to steal things from Tianyan sect?" That was true. Without Master Songfeng, she was only an early-stage core formation cultivator now. How could she fight against Tianyan sect, which had two nascent soul cultivators? Since she dared to do it, she naturally had something to rely on. Emotienga thought for a moment, then asked, "Why did you want to steal things from Tianyan sect?" Upon seeing Nie Wushang's hesitant expression, Emotienga added, "I'm just asking. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to." "There's nothing I can't say." Nie Wushang revealed a bitter smile. She lowered her head to look at her gloved hands and said softly, "You should know what kind of cultivator my master is, right?" Emotienga didn't answer. She didn't understand what Nie Wushang meant. Nie Wushang sighed, then continued to say, "What the celestial pole says is correct. He's indeed neither a human nor a ghost, neither a Taoist nor a devil. He can't be considered a real person at all. Although what I practice isn't his main cultivation technique, what kind of good things could he possibly teach me? I'm a martial cultivator, yet I've almost reached my current level without any bottlenecks in just over 100 years, because he used his own primordial devil aura to open up all my meridians." At this point, she saw Emotienga's shocked expression, so her smile became even more bitter. "Correct. From another perspective, I'm also not a pure person. Every once in a while, the primordial devil aura in my body will flare up. At that time, I'd rather die than live." Emotienga sucked in a breath of cold air when she heard this. She really didn't expect Master Songfeng to treat his disciple like this. "Is the thing you stole from Tianyan sect related to this?" "Correct." Nie Wushang was still staring at her hand in a daze. "Since I left Master, I wanted to live like a human. After I arrived on North Pole Island, I inquired everywhere for a way to eliminate the primordial devil aura. Finally, I heard that Tianyan sect had a treasure." At this point, she looked up at Emotienga and revealed a mocking smile. "Everyone says Yunzhong cultivators are more powerful than celestial pole cultivators. In my opinion, it's just that the way they fight is a bit strange. They can't be considered powerful." Emotienga was silent. Nie Wushang was a martial cultivator, so her way of fighting was very different from Dao cultivators. The two main characteristics of Yunzhong cultivators in fights of magical powers, speed and control of spiritual aura, were useless against her, so it was no wonder she said that. "Then what's next?" Emotienga asked. "How long are you going to hide here?" Nie Wushang said indifferently, "It won't be too long. That group of idiots won't be able to find me. 3 days later, I'll disguise myself as a cultivator going out to sea and leave North Pole Island. She stared at Emotienga, her gaze flickering. Of course, if you're still afraid I'll implicate you, I can also leave. Emotienga stared at her, raised her eyebrows and smiled. What? You want to provoke me to help you? Nia Wushang was stunned, but she soon smiled helplessly. Alright, we're not enemies now, but we're not friends either. I just want to stay here. If you want to drive me away, I can't do anything about it. But if you don't, I won't leave. Chapter 353. Nia Wushang looked very calm, as if she wasn't worried about being captured by Tianyin sect at all. Emotienga stared at her for a while, then suddenly asked, Did you notice me that day in Jade Chilin Pavilion? The smile on Nia Wushang's face froze and she stared at her. Do you want to ask if I led them to chase you? You can say that, Emotienga admitted frankly. She was naturally suspicious, since she wasn't going to be enemies with Nia Wushang. It would always be a thorn in her heart if she didn't clarify this matter. No. Emotienga breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Nia Wushang's answer. She then asked, Then when did you notice me? It was also around that time. Nia Wushang said, That day, I left the Jade Chilin Pavilion and hid my tracks. Who would have thought those Tianyin sect cultivators would chase after you? I followed them out of curiosity, and found out it was actually you. Furthermore, you're also living here just like me. Nia Wushang also felt this matter was inconceivable. She originally thought she and Emotienga walked two completely different paths. Now that Emotienga had a Dao companion to accompany her in her cultivation, she should be proud of herself in the celestial pole. She didn't expect Emotienga would escape in a sorry state just like her, and arrive in Yunzhong thousands of miles away. Emotienga stared at her for a long time, making Nia Wushang feel strange. She then asked, Why are you pestering me? With fellow Taoist Nia's personality, don't you prefer to be alone? The smile on Nia Wushang's face suddenly disappeared. She stared at Emotienga silently for a long time before she said, Can I not answer? Emotienga gave her a deep look then nodded. Up to you. She straightened her body, brushed her sleeves, then sat down on her praying mat. If you want to stay here, I won't drive you away. You can do as you please. Nia Wushang watched as Emotienga closed her eyes and began to meditate, no longer prepared to pay attention to her. She then looked down at her gloved hands and suddenly felt very confused. After so many years, she finally escaped. But how could she continue on this path? She couldn't help but look at Emotienga, who was meditating with her eyes closed, and seemed completely defenseless against her. Could this person give her an answer? Emotienga opened her eyes and stared at Nia Wushang, who was cultivating freely in the corner. She couldn't help but smirk. The reason she let Nia Wushang stay here, without worry, was naturally because she had confidence in her unique formation. As long as Nia Wushang made any strange movements, she could instantly kill her. However, from the looks of it now, Nia Wushang really didn't have any hostility towards her. In fact, it could even be said that she was a bit too close to her. How could ordinary people cultivate in the same room as other cultivators? Even if they were friends, it was rare for them to be so close. Unless it was a matter of life and death, cultivators would never be willing to let others see them while they were cultivating. Because she had the formation to rely on, Nia Wushang's life and death were basically in her hands, which was why she dared to cultivate in front of her without any scruples. What was the reason for Nia Wushang's death? He dared to enter her heavily restricted cultivation room, dared to drink her tea, and even dared to cultivate in front of her. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so she should be very vigilant. Why did she trust her so much? This kind of feeling made Emotienga feel very strange. It wasn't that she didn't have friends. Xianqing School's Luo Fengxue, Yi Jingguan, and the others could all be considered her good friends for many years. However, they were fellow disciples of the same sect, so their temperaments could also be considered congenial. But what about Nia Wushang? Nia Wushang's character and experience were worlds apart from hers. There was practically no similarity between them. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so presumably, she never lacked spirit stones or medicinal pills. However, she was casually beaten and scolded by her own master, so she almost had no self-respect at all. Would a person like her easily trust others? As for Emotinga herself, although she wandered from place to place when she was young and lacked medicinal pills, second uncle still gave her meticulous care. After losing second uncle, she got her master, Qin Shi, and some friends. It was precisely because of this kind of experience that although she developed a suspicious and cautious personality, she would also trust others and believe in the truth. She and Nie Wuxiang were basically two different kinds of people. What was even more strange was that, according to reason, she didn't reject trusting others, and Nie Wuxiang had saved her before. So it was normal for her to have a certain amount of goodwill towards Nie Wuxiang. However, based on Nie Wuxiang's experience growing up, she should be wary of her. Why did she seem more at ease than Emotinga? Emotinga felt she couldn't guess Nie Wuxiang's thoughts at all. She had never met someone like Nie Wuxiang. But this Nie Wuxiang couldn't be deduced with common sense. Why are you looking at me? Nie Wuxiang suddenly opened her eyes. Emotinga showed a faint smile and said calmly, I'm wondering what you're thinking in the end. Nie Wuxiang was stunned, but she soon revealed a faint smile and said, Then why don't you just ask? But you didn't answer me before. Emotinga stared at her and said, I really don't understand why you trust me so much. Nie Wuxiang hung her head and was silent for a long time before she finally said, I don't know. Maybe after leaving Master, I just want to try living another kind of life. Even if that's the case, why did it have to be me? Aren't you afraid I'll attack you for cultivating in my place without any vigilance? Nie Wuxiang chuckled at this question and raised her head to look at Emotinga. Just take it as my intuition that you can trust me. Emotinga was silent and didn't say anything else. Nie Wuxiang sighed softly, then closed her eyes again, hiding the loneliness in them. In fact, she still didn't say the real reason. Ever since she was a child, she had always dreamed of escaping that terrifying master and living a new life. But when she realized her dream, she found herself at a loss. How could she be considered a person if she lived like a person? She wanted to walk under the sun, talk and laugh with others, have a strong heart, and be willing to trust others. But now, her primordial devil aura was hidden deep in her meridians, so she still couldn't be considered a person. In the past year, she restrained her spiritual breath and hidden this in, looking for a way to dissolve the primordial devil aura, while thinking about what she should do next. After so many years, she already didn't know how to interact with people. How could she start the life she wanted? At this time, she saw Emotinga again, the person she envied and felt ashamed of. She suddenly thought that maybe this was her beginning. This was a rare old friend, who knew her background and didn't need to explain anything. Most importantly, Emotinga saved her, so she could gamble on whether there was goodwill between them, or even whether a friendship could be established. What if Emotinga didn't trust her? She thought about this problem. At that time, a deep sense of fatigue welled up in her heart. If that was the case, then just disappear. She laughed at herself for having such a world-hating idea. She escaped from the celestial pole with untold hardships and narrowly escaped death. But in the end, she put her life in someone else's hands. However, she didn't want to change her decision. For so many years, she had never controlled her own fate, so she was still at a loss even after breaking free from the shackles. That being the case, what if she let someone else decide for once? Now it seemed she had won the gamble. Emotinga didn't want to be her enemy. This made her feel a little meaning in life. Her life wasn't a failure. At least there was someone willing to accept her trust. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt a little hope in her loneliness. This kind of new beginning wasn't bad. 3 days later, Nie Wuxiang stopped cultivating and looked at the bright window. You're leaving? Emotinga opened her eyes and looked at her. Nie Wuxiang didn't turn her head and just answered, It's time. Emotinga thought for a while and finally asked, Do you have a surefire way to leave? Nie Wuxiang turned to look at her and said, Are you leaving or not? Emotinga was stunned for a moment. Then she said with a smile, If I go with you, does that mean I'm really your accomplice? Nie Wuxiang shrugged and said indifferently, Are you still worried about being implicated by me? I can't afford to provoke two nascent soul cultivators, Emotinga said faintly. But I can't escape responsibility for this matter. So I'd better leave North Pole Island as soon as possible. Nie Wuxiang smiled. So, you also plan to leave today? Emotinga smiled without answering. Nie Wuxiang didn't say much. She began to disguise herself in front of Emotinga. She took out a bunch of strange things from her Qingquan bag and started to wipe her face. All kinds of powdery things were smeared on her face. Some were red, some were yellow, and some were yellow. When she finished, her face became a strange waxy yellow. Then she added a mole, trimmed her eyebrows and stuck a beard on her face. When she finished, she tied up her hair again, changed her clothes, and immediately turned into a skinny man. Emotinga saw her transformation with her own eyes, so she was very curious. You're the secular world's disguise technique. Nie Wuxiang put away the things on the table, picked up a powder box, and shook it in front of her. Do you want it? Emotinga shook her head and looked at her carefully. She couldn't see any flaws, so she couldn't help but sigh. This is a good method. High-level cultivators can easily see through disguise technique, but the secular world's disguise technique can only be distinguished by eyesight. It's useless no matter how high your cultivation level is. It was also because of this reason that she disguised herself as a man when she entered Yunwu sect. Cultivators possess magic power, so they often relied on their divine sense and neglected the most fundamental problem of disguise. However, Nie Wuxiang's methods were much more brilliant than hers. She almost became a different person. I'm leaving. After putting away the things, Nie Wuxiang looked up at her. Thank you for taking me in this time. Emotinga smiled and didn't stand on ceremony. She asked, what's your plan after leaving North Pole Island? Naturally, I'm going to Yunzhong's inland, Nie Wuxiang said. North Pole Island's transporting formation has something to do with Tianyan sect, so it's not convenient for me to use it. I can only disguise myself as a cultivator going out to sea and fly there directly. I'll probably go to Eastern Tang first. At that time, I hope we'll be fated to meet again. Emotinga nodded. Since she crossed the South Sea and came to Yunzhong, she could naturally fly directly from North Pole Island to Yunzhong's inland. She didn't need to worry about this at all. All right, we'll meet again in the future. Nie Wuxiang sighed then smiled. She took out a bamboo hat from inside her robe and put it on her head. After Emotinga opened the restriction, she pushed the door open and walked out. Soon she disappeared without a sound. Emotinga stared at the place she left, silent for a long time. Chapter 354. Not long after Nie Wuxiang left, Emotinga stood up and put away her things. Although Nie Wuxiang had left, there were two nascent soul cultivators in Tianyan sect. What if they had some divine ability they didn't know about and found out? She might as well leave now before Tianyan sect suspected her. She entered the virtual sky world, put Xiaohua and Xiaofan into the spiritual beast bag, put away her magic weapons and other things one by one, and finally removed the formation of the cultivation room. Ayan. Upon hearing her voice, Ayan, who was watering the flowers outside the room, ran over. Nie Wuxiang left in front of her just now, but she didn't notice at all. Fairy, what's your order? I'm leaving, Emotinga said gently. She took out several spirit stones from her robe and gave them to her. These days you've served me very well. These spirit stones are your reward. I've already paid enough for the room. After I leave, you just need to report to the shopkeeper. Ayan was stunned. Fairy, you're leaving so soon. I've comprehended some profound principles during my cultivation these days, so I have to go back to inland Yunzhong first. We'll meet again if fate wills it. Emotinga said goodbye to her with a smile then left the small courtyard. Fairy. Ayan chased after her with the spirit stones in her hands. She wanted to thank her, but she found that there was no one outside the courtyard. She sighed regretfully and turned back silently. As a maid in this inn, she rarely met cultivators who were so easy to serve. She even gave her a lot of spirit stones before she left. She didn't know if she would have the chance to see her again in the future. After leaving the inn, Emotinga walked towards the free market. She had already inquired about the transporting formations to leave North Pole Island. There were several transporting formations on North Pole Island, and most of them were controlled by cultivation sections. Even if they didn't belong to any sect in name, they were more or less related to those sections. In other words, no matter which transporting formation she took, it was impossible to avoid Tianyin sect. Therefore, Imo Tiange chose the transporting formation belonging to Tianyin sect in the free market. Since she couldn't avoid it, she'd just borrow the one belonging to Tianyin sect. Nie Wuxiang had already left. As long as she didn't show the slightest bit of guilt, Tianyin sect presumably wouldn't notice anything. He went to the Jade Chilim Pavilion with familiarity and greeted the cultivator, who came to receive him. Then, with the guidance of the cultivator, he arrived at another hall where people were coming and going. This hall was much smaller than the one in the free market, and there were far fewer people here. After all, the teleportation fee wasn't cheap. Low-level cultivators often had to save up for a long time before they could even afford a single teleportation. As soon as Imo Tiange entered the hall, she sensed a cultivator's divine sense sweeping past her body. In a split second, her fine hairs stood on end. She unconsciously became vigilant, because this divine sense belonged to a nascent soul cultivator. Tianyin sect's nascent soul cultivators had really set out? Imo Tiange was rather astonished. What exactly did Nie Wuxiang steal? Since it was placed in the Jade Chilim Pavilion, it shouldn't be important enough for a nascent soul cultivator to come out and search for it, right? Although Imo Tiange had a lot of questions in her heart, her expression didn't change. Like the other cultivators, she walked to the transporting formation to register. Upon seeing that she was a core formation cultivator, the aura refining disciple in charge of registration respectfully asked her to wait on the side. The several foundation building cultivators who were in charge of the formation, however, stared at her with vigilance, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Imo Tiange showed a faint smile and pretended she didn't feel anything. While waiting, she leisurely sipped her tea. Tianyin sect seemed to be quite wealthy. The tea leaves served to guests in Jade Chilim Pavilion were unexpectedly so rich in spiritual aura. After a while, someone hurriedly came out of the inner wing and walked towards her. Imo Tiange raised her head to look and smiled. What a coincidence! It was unexpectedly that Madame Chizu again. Upon seeing her, Madame Chizu also smiled without saying anything. The two of them greeted each other with great tacit understanding. Fellow Taoist Chizu. Fellow Taoist Qingwei. After greeting each other, Madame Chizu asked with a smile. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, are you leaving North Pole Island? Why don't you stay for a few more days? Imo Tiange answered with a smile. I suddenly had an epiphany while cultivating recently, so I need to go back to inland Yunzhong as soon as possible. Fated chances wait for no man. Although I haven't strolled around North Pole Island enough, I have no choice but to leave. I see. No cultivator would doubt this reason. For cultivators, nothing was more important than fated chances. Imo Tiange looked around, then asked with a hint of curiosity, Fellow Taoist Chizu, could it be that you still haven't found that thief? Although there were no core formation cultivators at the scene, these foundation building cultivators nervously checked the cultivators who left. There were also nascent soul cultivators overseeing the scene. Once they found a core formation cultivator, Madame Chizu even came out to personally check. This was an extraordinarily grand display. Imo Tiange couldn't help but worry. Although Nie Wuxiang was only disguised as a cultivator who went to see, presumably, they also checked her, right? She wondered if she passed. Madame Chizu smiled helplessly. Yes, my nascent soul martial uncle from my sect ordered us to carefully check all the cultivators who left North Pole Island during this period of time. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, you don't mind, right? Imo Tiange was worried, but her expression was indifferent. She said, Fellow Taoist, please go ahead and check. I just hope you can let me leave as soon as possible. If I miss this fated chance, I don't know when the next one will be. That's natural, Madame Chizu readily agreed, then said, Fellow Taoist Qingwei, please. Imo Tiange stood up and followed Madame Chizu into an empty wing room. Madame Chizu took out a jade plate, circled Imo Tiange, and carefully examined it twice. In the end, she heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, All right, fellow Taoists can go and handle the formalities. Upon hearing this, Emotinga's tense nerves relaxed. She felt the divine sense entangling her finally dissipate. She still had the same expression on her face as she cupped her hands and bowed to Madame Chizu. Fellow Taoist Chizu, I'll take my leave now. Until we meet again. Until we meet again. It's really not a good time for me to meet fellow Taoist. My sect just happened to have a major event. If fellow Taoist comes to North Pole Island again in the future, I'll play the role of a host. Madame Chizu walked her to the transporting formation and told the disciple guarding it to waive her teleportation fee. The two of them exchanged pleasantries again before they formally said their goodbyes. With Madame Chizu's permission, the attitude of the several foundation building cultivators guarding the transporting formation immediately became much more polite. They asked respectfully, "May I know where Senior wants to be teleported to?" Emotinga smiled and asked, "How many places can your transporting formation teleport to?" "Senior, our transporting formation teleports to 3 places: Eastern Tang State, Southern Zhou State, and Northern Lin State." Emotinga said, "To Eastern Tang State. Is it directly teleported to the capital?" "No." The foundation building cultivator spread the map and pointed at Eastern Tang State. "Senior, please take a look. Our teleportation location is here. It's called Sky Snow City." "Here." Emotinga mumbled. "It seems a bit far." The foundation building cultivator showed an apologetic expression. "The capital is too far, and the teleportation fee is too high. However, there's also a transporting formation in Sky Snow City, so it should be very convenient for Senior to return to the sect." Emotinga knew he misunderstood, but she didn't explain. It would be advantageous for her if others thought she was a cultivator from Eastern Tang State. If they knew she came from the distant celestial pole, who knew whether someone would want to get something from her out of curiosity? She nodded. "All right, Sky Snow City it is." Chapter 355. This was a city located in the northern part of Yunzhong. The snow-white city walls were made of a special kind of white stone. The rows of buildings in the city were all made of stone without exception. Under the clear blue sky, there was a city that was as white as snow. The white was distinct, and the blue was clear. Looking at the beautiful scene in front of her, Emotinga couldn't help but sigh. No wonder the city was called Sky Snow City. The blue sky and white snow really lived up to its name. "Senior, do you want a map?" A detailed map of Sky Snow City, including all cultivators' immortals caves that can be rented, and the market square's location. "Senior, are you looking for someone or traveling? Do you need a guide?" "Senior." As soon as she came out of the transporting formation, Emotinga was surrounded by a group of people who introduced her to various things. There were many cultivators coming and going. Although most of them were aura-refining cultivators, it still made her sigh. Yunzhong was indeed a holy land for cultivation. It wasn't like a cultivation city like Kuanzhong City, which also had such an atmosphere. In the end, she just bought a map of Sky Snow City and sent the others away. Although Sky Snow City wasn't the capital of Eastern Tang, it was still a big city. According to the map, this city had a history of more than 10,000 years. Because there was a white stone mountain nearby, the city was built with mountain stones. The city was like snow, so it was called Sky Snow City. It was said that the white stones of Sky Snow City were extremely hard, like jade, and had the function of gathering spiritual aura. Although they were far inferior to spirit stones, they were better than nothing. Therefore, there were many middle and low-level cultivators living in this city. They called the white stones white spirit stones, and jokingly called the houses they lived in spirit stone houses, which was very interesting. At the same time, Emotinga also discovered that Sky Snow City itself had a medium-sized spirit vein, coupled with the function of white spirit stones. Although it wasn't enough to build a sect, it was a blessed land for many individual cultivators. It was no wonder that so many individual cultivators gathered in this city. After leaving Tianyan Sect Station, Emotinga thought for a moment and decided to find a place to stay first. Among the 5 great sects of Eastern Tang, Wuxing Valley was remote, Pufa School was in the west, Jingshu School was near the capital, Danxia Sect was in the north, and Juyan Sect happened to be not far from Sky Snow City. Emotinga's primary purpose in coming to Yunzhong was to travel. Her secondary purpose was to go to Danxia sect to investigate and find traces of Emo Yaoqing, as well as the complete art of Sunu. However, Danxia sect was, after all, a great cultivation group in Yunzhong, and Emo Yaoqing was a traitor, so it was unwise to ask her directly. They could only slowly get in touch with her and slowly figure things out. Therefore, under the current circumstances, it would be better for him to stay in Sky Snow City first, get in touch with the people of the Juyin sect, and find out more about the situation of the Dawning Pill sect. Sky Snow City was originally built on a mountain, and the entire city was built on White Stone Mountain. Whether it was the city walls or the houses, they were all made from local materials. Thus, the direction of the city was also uneven. Emotinga followed the map and headed towards the mountainside. According to the map, the majority of Sky Snow City was the property of the Ling clan, the largest cultivation clan in the Juyin sect. The Ling clan was located at the top of White Rock Mountain, occupying the area with the densest spirit qi. At the bottom of the mountain, there were many cave dwellings. These cave dwellings were of different sizes and had different spiritual qi. They were all for rent. Rogue cultivators who came to Sky Snow City would rent cave dwellings from the Ling clan, regardless of whether they were staying for a long time or for a short period of time. When she reached the mountainside, Emotinga looked at the map, then turned left according to the directions on the map. This White Rock Mountain was obviously a mine. There was very little vegetation here. There was only a small amount of yellow soil and some drought-resistant shrubs. Emotinga thought that the cultivators of Sky Snow City should be lacking in spiritual plants, right? She wondered what they used to concoct medicinal pills. As she was walking, she suddenly felt a spiritual aura fluctuation. Emotinga's gaze shifted, but she continued to walk forward as if nothing had happened. When she passed by a shrub, spiritual aura suddenly fluctuated above her head. A golden net came down from above, covering her completely in an instant. Ha 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 ha. Seeing that she couldn't move and was covered by the golden net, two cultivators came out from behind the mountain rock. One of them laughed. "Big brother, I told you no one could escape our inescapable net. What do you think?" These two cultivators were both in the foundation building realm. One of them had a messy beard on his face, so his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. The other had shifty eyes and looked very wretched. He was the one who spoke. The former was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, while the latter was in the early stage. The big man with the messy beard was very cautious. He frowned and reminded them, "Don't be arrogant. This person's cultivation level is higher than ours. No matter how high his cultivation level is, he still can't break the inescapable net, right?" The wretched man stared at Emotinga trapped in the golden net with a smile. He licked his lips and said, "Big brother, this woman looks pretty good. Look, don't talk nonsense." Before he could finish, the big man with the beard reprimanded him. "We stopped this robbery because we had no other choice. It's fine if we get the money. Have you forgotten the commandments?" "Commandments?" The wretched man snorted disdainfully. He was very dissatisfied. "Big brother, have you forgotten that we've been driven out? We're individual cultivators now. What does the commandments have to do with us?" The big man with the beard's eyes flashed. He then said with a heavy voice, "Whether we've been driven out or not, we still want to continue cultivating, so we can't forget the commandments. Aren't you afraid of the inner demon of core formation?" Upon hearing this, the wretched man was finally persuaded. He said reluctantly, Okay, I understand." Right after he finished speaking, he saw Emotinga struggling in the golden net. He squinted his eyes and teased her with a smile. "Miss, don't struggle anymore. This is an inescapable net, a magic weapon. Although your cultivation level is higher than ours, once you're trapped in the inescapable net, you'll still be trampled on." Emotinga stopped struggling and stared coldly at the two men. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" The wretched man stroked his mustache and stared at Emotinga's face with a covetous gaze. "Hand over your Qingquan bag." Emotinga didn't move. She just stared at them. Seeing that she didn't move for a long time, the wretched man became impatient. He pulled the knot in the net and said, "Hurry up or I'll also rob you. Junior Marshall brother." Right after he finished speaking, the big man with the beard shouted and stared at him with raised eyebrows. Under his gaze, the wretched man became weak and muttered, Okay, I understand." The big man with the beard looked at Emotienga and said gently, "Fellow Taoist, Junior Marshall brother, and I have no choice but to do this shady business. I can guarantee we won't hurt you." Emotienga stared at the big man with the beard and sneered. "What's the difference between wanting my Chinkuan bag and wanting my life? For cultivators, don't tell me you don't know the importance of a Chinkuan bag?" The big man with the beard was speechless. After a while he finally said, "Then you just need to hand over some spirit stones." Emotinga stared at him and couldn't help but narrow her eyes. "I only want spirit stones. Aren't you afraid I'll kill you after you let me go?" The big man with the beard shook his head. "This we have our own ways. Big brother, why are you talking to her so much? In any case, we've already done it." The wretched man couldn't wait to interrupt their conversation. He stared at Emotienga with an ominous glint in his eyes. "My big brother is easy to talk to, but I'm not. If you don't hand over the spirit stones, I'll give you a bit of suffering." As he spoke, he pulled the knot in his hand. Emotienga wrinkled her brows. She felt pain in the places covered by the golden net. She was a bit surprised. Martial Uncle Jinyang said most cultivators in Yunzhong had magic weapons that could control spiritual aura. She didn't expect that these two foundation-building cultivators would also have magic weapons that could control spiritual aura. "Junior Martial brother!" the big man with the beard shouted again. "Big brother!" the wretched man said unhappily. "Since we've already decided to do this, why should we be afraid of the slightest thing? What's the point of doing this?" The big man with the beard's eyes dimmed. He lowered his head and said nothing. Emotienga's gaze shifted to the two of them and she asked, "Why did you two set up an ambush here? Isn't this the way to Ling Clan? Presumably, there should be a lot of people here. Aren't you afraid of being bumped into by others?" This was exactly what puzzled her. She'd been trapped here for so long, but no one had come. "Ling Clan? Haha." Upon hearing her question, the wretched man laughed triumphantly and said, "There are so many idiots in this world. Who said this road leads to Ling Clan?" Emotienga wrinkled her brows and said slowly, "That map is fake. You're still too stupid." The wretched man smiled until his eyes narrowed. "This idea isn't bad, right? A fat sheep that just arrived in Sky Snow City, a lone cultivator. As long as we tamper with the map a bit, we'll naturally come here." Emotienga's expression darkened. "You! Quickly hand over your Chinkuan bag." The wretched man lost his patience and shouted, "If you don't hand it over, I won't be polite." "Be polite? I'd like to see how you're going to be rude." Under their gazes, Emotienga waved her sleeves. The spiritual aura in her body surged, and the momentum of a core formation cultivator instantly spread. The golden net covering her body fluttered without any wind. The big man with the beard was shocked and shouted, "You're in the core formation realm." The wretched man was stunned for a moment. Then he hastily made a hand seal, trying to retract the golden net. Emotienga snorted coldly and gently raised her hand. The wretched man immediately felt a strong pressure coming from the other side. His face instantly turned red, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. "Senior!" the big man with the beard shouted. He didn't dare to step forward, and took out his Chinkuan bag. "Senior, please let go of my junior martial brother. I'm willing to offer all my belongings to you." Emotienga cast a glance at the big man. He was actually smart. He knew he couldn't resist and immediately begged for mercy. Unfortunately, it was too late. Emotienga only glanced at him once, then withdrew her gaze. Under the surging spiritual aura, her sleeves fluttered even though there was no wind. She opened and closed her right palm. The wretched man let out an ah, and could only watch helplessly as the golden net in his hand was taken by her. The wretched man was so shocked that he couldn't react. Emotienga was angry at his frivolous words just now, so she didn't show any mercy. She gathered spiritual aura in her hand and struck him. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the wretched man was sent flying and crashed into a rock. His head tilted to one side, and his whole body softly fell to the ground. He was no longer breathing. Junior Marshall brother. The big man with the beard widened his eyes and threw himself at him. He was stunned when he realized he was no longer breathing. After a while, he suddenly turned to look at Emotienga. You, what? Do you want revenge? Emotienga raised her eyebrows and asked when she saw the fierce glint in the man's eyes. The man was stunned at first, but soon after, his expression turned sorrowful, and his whole body softened. A core formation cultivator? He was merely in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. How could he take revenge? Emotienga couldn't help but feel strange when she saw the man's appearance. Based on their conversation just now, these two people didn't have the same temperament. Why did they block the road and rob people together? This whole thing was strange. What was going on? Chapter 356. The bearded man hugged his companion and sobbed. Emotienga watched as the tall and strong man cried miserably, and the strange feeling in her heart grew stronger. What was the relationship between these two people? Their personalities were obviously very different, but they seemed to be very close to each other. And they even had some kind of commandment. After crying for a while, the man wiped his face dejectedly when he saw Emotienga. Senior, if you want to kill us, just kill us. We offended you first, so we can only blame ourselves for not following the commandment and not knowing how to recognize people. Emotienga frowned and stared at the man without saying anything. After a while, seeing that she didn't want to attack, the man raised his head and looked at her with puzzled eyes. Senior, are you a Buddhist cultivator? Emotienga suddenly asked. There was a flash of hesitation in the big man's eyes. He paused for a moment and finally nodded. Yes, Junior is a Buddhist cultivator. Sure enough. In Yunzhong, Buddhist cultivators were different from Dao cultivators. They had stricter commandments. However, she felt it was quite strange. That wretched man was fine, but this man obviously cared about commandments from time to time. So why did he rob passers-by with her? Since you're a Buddhist cultivator, why did you pretend to be a Dao cultivator and rob people here? Am I the first person you robbed? Upon hearing this question, the man fell silent. After a while he smiled bitterly and said, Senior, this is my secret and I'll never tell anyone. You were indeed the first person we robbed. We hired a child to sell maps at the teleportation circle. If we took a fancy to someone, we would ask him to sell the tampered map to that person. Who knew that we would make a mistake at the first time? We really brought this upon ourselves. At this point he sighed dejectedly. Senior, if you want to kill me, just kill me. I have nothing to say. However, after he closed his eyes and waited for a long time, Emotienga only asked, Where does the Ling house go? The man opened his eyes and stared blankly at Emotienga. You won't kill me? Emotienga looked at him calmly and repeated, Where does the Ling house go? Over there. He pointed at the road on the right in a daze. Emotienga nodded, then turned around and walked away. Senior, the man shouted behind her. Emotienga stopped and her gaze turned cold. What? Do you want me to kill you? The burly man hurriedly shook his head and said, That inescapable net. Emotienga couldn't help but laugh. Could it be that you still want to go back? The burly man was silent. He knew that this was just wishful thinking. They blocked the road and robbed a core formation senior. It was already good enough that the senior didn't kill them. How could they possibly return the magic treasure to him? It was just that if he lost his life, then it would have been fine. He wouldn't have thought about anything else. But now, his junior brother was dead, and the heaven and earth net was lost. But he was left with his life. How could he face his master? No, he couldn't continue to be dispirited like this. At the very least, he had to return to Mount Baifu. As he watched Emotienga's departing figure, the burly man's gaze gradually became fervent. Once she was back on the right path, she took out the golden net from her sleeve and examined it carefully. This net was woven from an unknown golden thread. It was exquisite and light as if it was weightless. The spiritual energy attached to it was very strange. It was very different from the spiritual energy of cultivators. Could it be Buddhist energy? After thinking for a while, she shook her head, threw the golden net into her chinquan bag, and continued forward. In fact, if she wanted to know the inside story, she could have used the soul-searching technique on that burly man. However, this wasn't a big deal, so it wasn't worth it. For the current her, this was a trivial matter. She hated that wretched man, so she just killed him. If she didn't want to kill the bearded burly man, then she wouldn't kill him. There was no need to think about the consequences. With strength, many problems wouldn't be a problem. After taking the path on the right, a courtyard made of white stones soon appeared in front of him. At the entrance of the courtyard, there were several low-level aura refining cultivators guarding the door. If any cultivators came to visit, they would chat with them. As Emotinga approached, someone immediately came to greet her. "Senior, are you here to rent an immortal's cave?" Emotinga nodded. "Yes." That person immediately said, "Please come with me." Emotinga followed the aura refining cultivator into the courtyard and into a room. This room looked like an ordinary study, similar to Xianqing School's steward's hall. There was a wide table on one side, and a foundation building cultivator was lying motionlessly on the table, holding a wine bottle in his hand. The whole room reeked of alcohol. When the aura refining cultivator who led Emotinga into the room saw her eyebrows twitching unconsciously, he hastily opened the window, then stepped forward to push the seemingly drunk foundation building cultivator. Second uncle, second uncle." After a while the cultivator finally moved. Without raising his head, he said with dissatisfaction, "What do you want?" The aura refining cultivator smiled apologetically. "Second uncle, there's a foundation building senior here to rent an immortal's cave." Oh. After a while, the cultivator finally reacted. He rubbed his eyes, stretched his body and shifted his gaze to Emotinga. Seeing that Emotinga was a young woman, the cultivator slightly curbed his arrogance and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you here to rent an immortal's cave?" Emotinga answered calmly. This cultivator from Ling clan looked very young. He looked to be about 30 years old. He had a short beard and a ruddy complexion. Unfortunately, he was too slovenly and looked very sloppy. The cultivator glanced at her, then pointed at the chair across from him. "Please sit." Emotinga looked at the dark blue Taoist robe at the cuffs of his sleeves, then at the chair. After a moment of hesitation, she cautiously sat down. Upon seeing her expression, the cultivator probably felt embarrassed. His face turned slightly red, and he rolled up his sleeves. "May I know what kind of immortal's cave fellow Taoist wants to rent?" Emotinga said. "I'm not familiar with Sky Snow City, so I don't know what's different about the immortal's cave your manor rents. Fellow Taoist, please tell me." "Oh, I see." The cultivator nodded, then took a scroll from the table. He then spread it open with his hand. This scroll was extremely large and practically covered the entire table. The shape of a mountain was drawn on it. Obviously, it was a map of Whitestone Mountain. Between the mountain rocks, there were many circles drawn. These circles varied in size and color. Some were white, some were blue, some were green, and some were purple. Some were ticked and some weren't. The cultivator from Ling clan said, "Our Ling clan's immortal's cave is divided into 4 kinds according to the spiritual aura. The purple one has the richest spiritual aura. The green one is barely passable. The blue one is slightly worse. And the white one only has a little bit of spiritual aura." The size of the circles indicates the size of the immortal's cave. A small immortal's cave only has 3 stone rooms, while a medium-sized immortal's cave has everything you need: a cultivation room, a spiritual beast room, a pill concocting room, a medicinal garden. Whatever you want, you can have it. A large immortal's cave not only has all these, but it also has a cultivation room for disciples and juniors. As for the price, the bigger the immortal's cave, the more expensive it is. At this point, the cultivator raised his head and glanced at Emotinga. "Is fellow Taoist alone?" "Yes. If fellow Taoist is alone, it doesn't need to be too big. You can choose a small or medium-sized one." Emotinga nodded, expressing her agreement. "Then what's the price according to the spiritual aura?" The cultivator didn't answer her question. Instead, he asked, "Fellow Taoist, do you want to stay here permanently or temporarily?" Emotinga thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe for a few months, maybe for a year or 2. Then it's neither too long nor too short." The cultivator muttered to himself, then said, "Fellow Taoist, We rent caves on a daily basis and an annual basis. The daily rent is 3 times higher than the annual rent. If you want to stay for more than 4 months, we'll rent it annually. Otherwise, we'll rent it daily. Emotinga thought for a moment, then said, Then we'll rent it annually. The cultivator nodded. According to the medium-sized Immortal's Cave, the annual rent is 400 spirit stones for a purple Immortal's Cave, 280 spirit stones for a green Immortal's Cave, 150 spirit stones for a blue Immortal's Cave, and only 30 spirit stones for a white Immortal's Cave. He quickly sized up Emotinga, then said, Fellow Taoist, you're a foundation-building cultivator, and your cultivation level is quite high. Not to mention the purple Immortal's Cave. I think you should be able to afford the green and blue Immortal's Caves. Emotinga said, 280 spirit stones a year, 150 spirit stones a year. This price isn't low, right? Even if it was a white Immortal's Cave, which costs 30 spirit stones a year, ordinary aura refining cultivators couldn't afford it. Back when she was in Yunwu sect, she only had to pay 5 spirit stones a month. The Ling clan cultivator laughed and said, Fellow Taoist, don't look down on Ling clan's Immortal's Cave. Even if it's a white Immortal's Cave, it's still much better than other places in Sky Snow City. Coupled with the function of white spirit stones, it's very difficult to find an Immortal's Cave like this in other cities. What he said wasn't false. For example, on North Pole Island, the inn's small courtyard costs 1 spirit stone a day, which was equivalent to more than 300 spirit stones a year. Moreover, the spiritual aura there was only average. On her way here, Emotinga only felt that although the spirit veins here were also average, when paired with white spirit stones, they could be considered above average. All right, Emotinga said. I want a blue Immortal's Cave. A small one is fine. How many spirit stones? When the Ling clan cultivator heard this, he glanced at her with slight astonishment, but he didn't say anything. He just answered, 80 spirit stones a year. This price was also affordable for ordinary foundation-building cultivators. Emotinga nodded, took out a small bag of spirit stones from her Qingquan bag, handed it over, and poured it on the table. This is a year's rent. The Ling clan cultivator roughly glanced at it, then flicked his sleeve. In an instant, only a few spirit stones remained on the table. Emotinga looked down, and was a bit surprised. She didn't count them in detail. She just roughly counted them. This cultivator only glanced at them, but he actually counted them? After receiving the spirit stones, the Ling clan cultivator said, All right, fellow Taoist, you can see for yourself where you want to live. If there's no tick, it means there's currently no one living there. You can choose whichever you like. Emotinga put away the few remaining spirit stones on the table, then lowered her head to look at the scroll. In the end, she chose a small blue circle in the corner. I'll stay here. The Ling clan cultivator nodded. He gathered spiritual aura on his fingertips and pointed at the small blue circle. The circle shone with a blue light, and a tick appeared. Then he took out a jade tablet from his Qingquan bag, cast a spell on it, and handed it over. This is the Immortal's Cave tablet. Fellow Taoists, keep it well. Emotinga took it. Thank you. The Ling clan cultivator waved his hand and shouted, Xiaoshun, come here. The low-level cultivator who led Emotinga into the Immortal's Cave hurriedly ran inside. Second uncle. The cultivator pointed at Emotinga. Take her to Immortal's Cave number 23. Yes. The low-level cultivator turned to Emotinga. Senior, please. When Emotinga walked out of the room, she couldn't help but shake her head when she saw the Ling clan cultivator holding the wine bottle again. There were actually cultivators in this world who loved wine so much. After she walked far away, the Ling clan cultivator held the wine bottle, rubbed his nose and said to himself, He has so many treasures, but he only lives in a blue Immortal's Cave, and it's even a small one. He's really stingy. Chapter 357. Emotinga didn't hear what the Ling family cultivator said. If she knew, she would definitely be shocked by the sharpness of this person's gaze, and be very vigilant. Although she had a lot of magic weapons, they were all properly stored in her Qingquan bag. She only wore a pair of cloud treading boots. The cloud-treading boots weren't magic weapons that exposed spiritual aura, so very few people noticed them at first glance. However, this Ling family cultivator set a lot of treasures, but she didn't know how he saw it. Not to mention this Ling family cultivator, Emotienga smoothly arrived at mysterious cave number 23, under the guidance of the aura refining cultivator, Xiaoshan. After verifying that there were no mistakes, the aura refining cultivator excused himself and left. Emotienga entered the blue aura immortal's cave and carefully examined it. There was a formation laid inside the cave. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary forbidding formation, but in fact, there was a secret spying restriction hidden inside. Ling family was a great cultivation clan belonging to Juyin sect. In Sky Snow City, their word was law. It wasn't strange for this kind of cultivation clan with absolute power to play some tricks. In any case, the people renting their immortals' caves were individual cultivators, so they generally wouldn't discover this restriction. Even if they did, they could only swallow their anger and couldn't argue with them. Because of that, Emotienga only used some tricks to erase this prying restriction. Then, she laid her own formation to replace Ling family's formation. She entered the virtual sky world and released Xiaohua and Xiaofan to let them cultivate on their own. Just as she was about to take out the magic weapons and continue refining them, Xiaohua, who had just released the spiritual beast bag, rushed in and suddenly bit Emotienga's sleeve, pulling her outside. "What's wrong?" Emotienga was puzzled when she sensed Xiaohua's anxiety. Xiaohua naturally wouldn't answer. It just bit her sleeve and ran outside. Emotienga followed it out of the cultivation room and ran towards the spiritual beast room. Xiaohua slammed the door with its paw and rushed in first. Emotienga was shocked as soon as she entered. She saw Feifei lying on the ground motionless. Its originally golden fur had dimmed a lot. How could this be? She rushed forward and picked Feifei up. She discovered that its spiritual aura was very weak, and its body was ice cold. Although Feifei's cultivation level wasn't high, it was very smart. Ever since it established a spiritual beast contract with her, it was like a fish in water in the virtual sky world. Aside from occasionally pestering her to play with it, it never needed her to take care of it. When it was thirsty or hungry, it would find something to eat on its own. She didn't need to care much about its cultivation. She just needed to give it medicinal pills from time to time. But what was going on? Xiaohua whimpered and circled around Emotienga twice, looking very downcast. Emotienga didn't have time to pay attention to it. She carried Feifei back to her cultivation room and carefully examined the spiritual aura inside its body. The special characteristic of the Feifei race was that they didn't have great power, but they had a unique affinity. It was the same for Feifei. The spiritual energy in its body was quite gentle and not invasive at all. As soon as one approached it, it gave people a feeling of holiness. After a while, Emotienga finally withdrew her spiritual aura from Feifei's body, and a frown appeared on her face. She had checked Feifei's meridians and dantian, and didn't find anything abnormal. But it was a fact that the spiritual aura was very weak. What exactly went wrong? Did it eat something? Or did something go wrong with its cultivation? Regardless of which it was, as long as there was no abnormality in its spiritual aura, she was helpless. Generally speaking, when a cultivator or spiritual beast encountered a problem in their cultivation, it would directly reflect on their spiritual aura. At that time, as long as the chaotic spiritual aura was straightened out, their injuries would naturally heal. But Feifei's current situation wasn't like that, which completely baffled Emotienga. She was anxious for a long time, but she could only think of one method. Since its spiritual aura was weak, she could just replenish it. However, this method was somewhat risky. If she replenished too much spiritual aura, it wouldn't be able to bear it for a while, and its meridians and dantian would also be damaged. After thinking for a while, Emotienga clenched her teeth and made up her mind. If she let Feifei go on like this, its spiritual aura would become weaker and weaker, and in the end, it wouldn't be able to escape its fate of death. She might as well risk it. With that thought in mind, she took out a jade bottle from her Qingquan bag, poured out a pill, and fed it to Feifei. Feifei was still lying motionlessly on the ground, but soon, Its body began to slowly warm up. Seeing that it was effective, Emotinga was delighted and continued to stare at it. After a while, the pill's effects slowly weakened, so she fed it another pill. Then she kept repeating the process. When the spiritual aura dissipated, she fed Feifei medicine. After a while, when the spiritual aura dissipated again, she continued to feed it medicine. Time passed day by day. Feifei never woke up, but it also didn't die. Emotinga called Xiaofan over, and together with Xiaofan, they took turns feeding Feifei medicine. Because she left most of the medicine to Qin Shi before she left, she opened the furnace again to concoct medicinal pills. A month later, the spiritual aura in Feifei's body finally increased. It wasn't as thin as before, and its dissipation speed wasn't as fast. Emotinga once again used spiritual aura to enter its meridians, going deep into its dantian along the meridians, and finally found the source of the spiritual aura dissipation. As it turned out, there was a weak mass of spiritual aura inside Feifei's dantian. If she didn't look carefully, she wouldn't be able to find it at all. This mass of spiritual aura seemed to be wrapped in something. She carefully probed the spiritual aura, only to find that it was actually a small thing as weak as a speck of dust. It was this thing that was slowly absorbing its spiritual aura. Now this speck of dust seemed to have eaten its fill, and was a lot bigger than before, which was why Emotinga discovered it. Although she found the source, it was an unknown object, so Emotinga didn't dare to deal with it casually. She continued to feed Feifei medicinal pills while observing the speck of dust. As more and more medicinal pills were fed, the speck of dust finally stopped absorbing spiritual aura, and Feifei's body slowly warmed up. Emotinga heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Feifei didn't die, she could slowly investigate the cause. But Feifei still didn't wake up. The speck of dust absorbed its fill of spiritual aura, and slowly grew bigger, as if it was undergoing some kind of change. Several months later, the speck of dust suddenly exploded, emitting a strong spiritual aura. Emotinga was shocked. She was afraid it would injure Feifei's dantian, but miraculously, Feifei's spiritual aura was extremely close to the speck of dust. It even separated a part of its spiritual aura to wrap around the speck of dust, seemingly protecting it. Upon seeing this, a thought occurred to Emotinga. Could it be that this thing originally belonged to Feifei? This was strange. Feifei was something produced in its body, so why was it crazily absorbing its spiritual aura, causing it to almost lose its life? If no one looked after it and didn't feed it medicinal pills to replenish its spiritual aura, wouldn't Feifei have been tormented to death by this thing? Emotinga couldn't answer this question now, so she could only wait for Feifei to wake up. Surrounded by rich spiritual aura, the golden light on Feifei's body became brighter and brighter. Gradually, its whole body was enveloped by a dazzling golden light. Then countless spiritual aura rushed into its body. Emotinga was extremely shocked as she watched the scene in front of her. She knew what was happening. This situation was very similar to when Xiaohua advanced to the 5th rank. Feifei was about to advance to the next realm. What happened next proved her conjecture. Feifei didn't stop absorbing spiritual aura. The golden light submerged the whole cultivation room. Within the golden light, Feifei's spiritual aura fluctuations became stronger and stronger. It was no longer as weak as before, but it began to undulate, breathe, and circulate. Now that she was sure it was about to advance, Missouri Tinga felt relieved. She left the cultivation room to Feifei, while she looked for another room to meditate and refine her magic weapon. As for Xiaohua, it automatically stood guard outside the door to protect Feifei. Seeing this, Emotinga smiled knowingly. In this virtual sky world, Xiaohua and Feifei had no other playmates. The two spiritual beasts had accompanied each other for dozens of years, and had a very good relationship with each other. When Xiaohua advanced, Feifei was anxious. Now that Feifei was about to advance, Xiaohua was the same. Spiritual beasts were spiritual beings of heaven and earth, so they also had human feelings. In addition, she was also looking forward to Feifei's appearance after it advanced. She remembered that when she was in Linhai, the people of Bishuan Court told her that Feifei was a kind of unique spiritual beast. They didn't have powerful spells, but they could coexist peacefully with other demonic beasts. They were also very sensitive to spiritual aura, but their cultivation was extremely slow. Generally, an adult Feifei was only in the second or third rank. Emotienga already felt it was very good that Feifei could cultivate to the fourth rank so quickly in this virtual sky world. If it advanced again, it would be in the fifth rank. A fifth rank spiritual beast was equivalent to a core formation cultivator. Most likely, the cultivators in Linhai had never seen a fifth rank Feifei, right? Emotienga didn't know whether it had any unique spells or not. Among her three spiritual beasts, Xiaofan and Xiaohua were already in the fifth rank. If Feifei also advanced to the fifth rank, other core formation cultivators would be envious. It was already difficult for them to have one fifth rank spiritual beast, so where would they find three? If it wasn't for the virtual sky world, Emotienga wouldn't have three fifth rank spiritual beasts. Raising spiritual beasts required a lot of medicinal pills. Most cultivators couldn't even guarantee their own medicinal pills, so how could they casually give them to spiritual beasts? In the following time, Emotienga sacrificed and refined her magic weapons while waiting for Feifei to advance. Because of the special circumstances of Feifei's advancement, she didn't dare to leave rashly. She could only put other matters aside and wait until Feifei confirmed its advancement. Several months later, the cultivation room Feifei was in finally stopped absorbing spiritual aura and burst with dazzling golden light. This golden light spread and practically dyed the entire virtual sky world gold. Spiritual lights fluttered in the sky. Emotienga stretched out her hand and discovered that specks of spiritual light were scattered all over the virtual sky world. She was extremely astonished. The momentum of Feifei's advancement was actually much stronger than Xiaohua's. It looked a bit like a cultivator's core formation. Could this also be a characteristic of its race? The spiritual lights lasted for about half a day, before they finally dissipated slowly. The spiritual aura also gradually calmed down. Emotienga stood outside the cultivation room. Just as she was about to push the door open, she heard a squeak, and the door was pushed open. Then a mass of golden light threw itself into her arms, and a delicate voice rang in her ears. "Master!" Emotienga held Feifei, whose body was still petite, but whose momentum was completely different. She was extremely astonished. "Feifei, you can talk?" Feifei rubbed itself against her chest and yawned. It then said with satisfaction, "I can finally talk. I've been holding it in for so long." Emotienga was petrified. She knew Feifei wasn't an ordinary spiritual beast, but why did its voice, which was as delicate as a child's, have this kind of old-fashioned tone? Wasn't Feifei a very cute and playful little spiritual beast? Chapter 358. Emotienga was sitting on a praying mat in the cultivation room. There were 2 cups of tea on the small tea table in front of her, emitting smoke. In front of her, Feifei was rolling around on the cattail hassock while combing his shiny golden fur. When it finished combing its golden fur, it sat on the praying mat in a very elegant posture. Then it picked up the tea with its claws, narrowed its eyes, and took a sip with satisfaction. Emotienga was already shocked, so she was very calm when she looked at Feifei. Xiaofan was a sea dragon, so it had wisdom that surpassed spiritual beasts of the same rank. Emotienga already knew this, but she didn't expect Feifei would also have such wisdom when it advanced. It didn't look like a spiritual beast at all. Even if it was a human, it rarely had such rich expressions. In that case, maybe it really was a descendant of the distant past divine beast, Feifei. After drinking the tea, Feifei raised its head and stared at Emotienga with its round eyes for a long time before it said, "Without you, I wouldn't have been able to advance to the 5th rank so quickly. And I'll recognize you as my master." Recognize? In other words, it actually didn't quite agree with the concept of master. Emotienga was speechless for a while before she remembered to ask, "Don't we have a spiritual beast contract?" Feifei curled its lips, scratched the golden fur on its forehead, and said, "That's one thing, but if I don't want to recognize you, it's not impossible." It raised its head to look at Emotienga and continued, "The most important thing is that our Feifei is very grateful. Without you, I probably wouldn't have advanced to the 5th rank until the end of my life, so I'll recognize you as my master. Ever since Feifei learned how to talk, Emotinga had been rendered speechless many times. This Feifei definitely wasn't that playful, and spoiled little spiritual beast from before. In the end, she had no idea what it was. Master, what's with your expression? Feifei raised its head and asked her in a delicate voice. Emotinga was silent. She picked up the teacup on the tea table and took a big gulp, but it was so hot that she spat it out, splashing the tea on the tea table and Feifei's beautiful golden fur. Feifei rolled around and jumped nonstop. You, my fur. You made my fur wet. Emotinga wiped the corner of her mouth and rubbed her brows. She cast a spell, causing the water stains on Feifei's body to disappear without a trace. Seeing that her golden fur had regained its bright luster, Feifei squatted back in satisfaction and continued to straighten them out one by one. Emotinga stared at him for a long time. In the end, she felt powerless. Are you the original Feifei? Of course. Feifei did not even raise her head. She licked her golden fur and said, well, actually, you can say that it's half of me. Half? Yeah. Feifei played with its golden fur and said, didn't you notice that the phenomenon of my leveling up is a little abnormal? Emotinga said, there's something inside your body that's absorbing all the spiritual aura in your body. I'm very confused. If we didn't come in at that time, and Xiahua didn't notice anything wrong with you, wouldn't you have died here? More or less. At the mention of this topic, Feifei's expression was indifferent. If you didn't come back in time, I would have failed my advancement and died. Why? Emotinga blurted out. Could it be that when your Feifei advanced to the 5th rank, there were elders watching over you? Elders? Feifei wagged her tail. Her gaze was helpless, and her delicate voice carried a hint of melancholy. How could our Feifei have any elders watching over us? It's already good enough that we didn't die out. Emotinga wrinkled her brows. What does that mean? The Feifei race is going to be extinct soon? Upon seeing her doubt, Feifei coughed, sat up straight and said, since I recognized you as my master, you have the right to know these things. Before I tell you these things, I have to first let you know what kind of race we Feifei are. After a long silence, Feifei said, the cultivators in Linhai all think we're just a race that's close to the Feifei from the distant past era. But in fact, we're the descendants of the Feifei. Upon seeing Emotinga's doubtful gaze, Feifei rushed to say, are you wondering why I know these things? Emotinga nodded. Before you advanced to the 5th rank, your intelligence wasn't high. When I got you, you were just a cub. That being the case, where did you hear these things from? Feifei said, this is exactly what I want to tell you. What kind of race we Feifei are. It paused for a moment then said, since the distant past era, we've lived in the human world, and we're called spirits. Because we were born with powerful strength, we're also called divine beasts. The so-called divine beasts are led by the 4 symbols: the Qilin, the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise guard the 4 directions, and the Qilin guards the central palace. The azure dragon is wood, the white tiger is gold, the vermilion bird is fire, the black tortoise is water, and the Qilin is earth. Under the 4 symbols and 5 spirits, there are us, the spirit race, who are born with divine breath. Although we're not as powerful as the 5 spirits, every divine beast race has its own characteristics. The characteristics of us Feifei are our innate affinity and inheritance of divine power. Inheritance? Emotinga was stunned. A thought flashed in her mind. Could it be that you can even inherit memories? Correct. Feifei waved its paw and praised. You're worthy of being my master. It paused for a moment then continued to say, we Feifei don't have powerful spells, but we can make friends with all spiritual beasts. Even ferocious beasts are no exception. In addition, every Feifei born will be born with the common memory of their race sealed. Emotinga thought for a moment. So you've always had the memory of your race in your body, but your cultivation level was too low, so you couldn't inherit it. Correct. Feifei stretched out its paw and looked at it carefully. Every Feifei is like this. When they advance to the 5th rank, the memory in their body will fuse with them. However, ever since the world was divided into two realms, we Feifei who stayed in the human world couldn't advance to the 5th rank without the guidance of our elders. Two realms. Emotinga suddenly realized this topic seemed to be related to the changes in the human world since the distant past era. Since you're divine beasts, why didn't you go to the spiritual realm? Of course it's because something went wrong. Feifei put its paw on the tea table and said, when the world was divided into two realms, most of our ancestors went to the spiritual realm, but some weak ones were left in the human world. Don't ask me why, I can't possibly know everything. Inheritance of memories isn't omnipotent. Master, you've also seen the process of my realm advancement. Without the guidance of a powerful elder, it's impossible for me to advance by myself. This is also the reason why the strength of our Feifei is getting lower and lower. Even when we grow up and die, we're only in the 2nd or 3rd rank. Emotienga was deeply touched by this. In that situation, if she returned to the virtual sky world a bit later, Feifei would have had all its spiritual aura absorbed by the dust in its body and died. She thought for a while then asked, what's going on with that thing in your body? When Xiaohua advanced, it was very similar to human cultivators in the core formation realm. But you're completely different. Is this the difference between the divine beasts of the distant past era and the spiritual beasts of today? That's not it, Feifei said. The thing in my body is actually the inner core we were born with. We spiritual beasts are different from you cultivators. Even if we're in the 1st rank, we still have a chance to form an inner core. It's just that the chance is very small. But our Feifei's inner core is innate. Oh, Emotienga understood. So when you advance to the 5th rank, as long as your inner core absorbs enough spiritual aura, you can advance successfully? Yes. It's just that our cultivation levels aren't high enough. Our inner cores are very weak and can't affect our bodies at all. Only when our cultivation levels are high enough will our inner cores be stimulated and start to absorb spiritual aura. As long as we absorb enough spiritual aura, we can advance smoothly. I see. Emotinga nodded to show she understood. Feifei and the others were the descendants of the divine beasts left in the human realm when the demonic beasts were separated. Due to the characteristics of their race, without elders to look after them, they could only become weaker and weaker until they were reduced to ordinary spiritual beasts. Therefore, the original Feifei was really innocent, but the current Feifei had inherited the memory of its race and became a real Feifei. Alright, I'm done. Feifei's original proper kneeling posture turned into a crouching position. It blinked and stared at Emotienga. In an instant, its voice became flattering. Master, your clear sky pills are very delicious. Can you let me eat too? Emotienga's hand paused and her eyebrows twitched. How do you know clear sky pills are delicious? Have you ever secretly eaten them? She had always given the 3 spiritual beasts medicinal pills that were specially concocted for them. Clear sky pills were medicinal pills for human core formation cultivators. So she had never given them to Feifei. Ehe. Feifei laughed and buried its face under its paws. Master, when you were concocting medicinal pills, I was curious, so I secretly hid too. Emotienga closed the teacup, crossed her arms over her chest and stared at it. Could it be that you suddenly advanced because you ate clear sky pills? A 5th rank spiritual beast was equivalent to a human's core formation realm. So logically, clear sky pills could only be eaten by spiritual beasts above the 5th rank. Feifei had just advanced, so what was its cultivation level when it ate clear sky pills? Master, don't be angry. Seeing that Emotienga's eyebrows were raised, Feifei quietly shrunk its body down, revealing only its head. This is the intuition of a divine beast. When my cultivation level is high enough, I really want to eat to replenish my spiritual aura. I've always let you eat whatever you want in the medicinal garden. Emotienga snorted. When I first got you, you wanted to eat flowerless golden fruits. And now you actually want to eat clear sky pills. Right. Feifei hastily nodded its head. At that time, I was only in the 1st rank, so eating flowerless golden fruits wasn't a problem. Now eating clear sky pills naturally wouldn't be a problem. I'm a divine beast, so I'm naturally different from ordinary spiritual beasts. Hey master, don't pull me. I'm a divine beast now. I'm no longer the Feifei you could rub around as you pleased. Chapter 359. She originally planned to have more contact with the cultivators of Juyin sect after arriving at Sky Snow City, but she didn't expect Feifei's advancement would delay her for more than half a year. When Feifei's matter was finally settled, Emo Tienga exited the virtual sky world. However, to her surprise, several sound-transmitting talismans were floating in front of her cave. She collected all the sound-transmitting talismans. 2 of them were sent by cultivators who lived with her in Ling Clan's cave. They wanted to say hello when they heard there was a foundation-building cultivator living here. The last talisman was a bit strange. The person who sent it was a cultivator from the Ling family that she had met once when she rented the cave abode. The content of this sound-transmitting talisman was very simple. It only said that if she came out of closed-door meditation she should reply. But Emo Tienga felt it was very strange. She had erased the Ling clan's spying restriction in this cave. So how did this person know she was in closed-door meditation? Moreover, it seemed like this sound-transmitting talisman had stopped here for a long time. How did he know when she would reply? Maybe it would be useless at that time. After thinking about it, she still replied to the sound-transmitting talisman, according to the message left by the Ling clan cultivator. After that, she prepared to take a stroll in Sky Snow City. Unexpectedly, just as she closed her cave, she saw a flame flashing across the sky. Another sound-transmitting talisman flew towards her. Emo Tienga took the sound-transmitting talisman. The talisman ignited by itself and said, "Fellow Taoist, please wait for a moment. I'll be there soon." Emo Tienga was stunned. What does this mean? Is this person waiting for my reply? Moreover, he's looking for me in such a hurry. Is there something urgent? No matter what it is, I'll know after a while. After waiting patiently for a while, Emo Tienga suddenly looked up and saw a blue flight light flashing across the sky with a powerful momentum, rushing towards her. Then, a core formation cultivator wearing an apricot-colored Taoist robe landed in front of her. "I'm Ling Yunha. How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" This person raised his hand and greeted her politely. Emo Tienga was startled. The person in front of her had a clean face and handsome facial features. His long black hair was neatly tied into a Taoist bun with a crown. The apricot-colored Taoist robe he wore was painted with gorgeous cloud patterns, which seemed to highlight its owner's extraordinary identity. He looked imposing and had the demeanor of an immortal. But for all that, she found traces of familiarity in that face, and the tone of voice, which roused her memory. This person was actually the cultivator of the Ling family, who had helped her with the procedures when she rented the cave abode. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the unkempt and shabby-looking foundation establishment cultivator back then would look like this after changing his clothes. Not only did he look much younger, but his aura was also extraordinary. Most importantly, this person was hiding his cultivation level just like her. He wasn't in the foundation building realm, but the middle stage of the core formation realm. Emo Tienga raised her hand to greet him, but didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked bluntly, "Fellow Taoist Ling, what brings you here?" Hearing this question, surprise flashed across this person's eyes. Then he smiled and said, "Aren't you going to ask me how I know your cultivation level and why I'm hiding it?" Emo Tienga stared at him and said faintly, "If fellow Taoist is willing to tell me, of course I want to know." Her meaning was that if he didn't want to tell her, it was useless for her to ask. Upon hearing her answer, this person smiled. "Sure enough, I didn't find the wrong person." He looked behind Emo Tienga and asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, aren't you going to invite me in to sit?" Emo Tienga thought for a moment. This person definitely had something to tell her. Judging from his attitude, it shouldn't be something bad. Thus, she made an inviting gesture. "Fellow Taoist Ling, please come in." When Ling family rented this cave, they had already prepared daily necessities. So Emo Tienga directly invited this person into the small hall used for receiving guests. The 2 of them sat down. This Ling family cultivator looked around the cave, then said with a meaningful smile, Fellow Taoists' attainments and formations are really profound. This defensive formation is really extraordinary. Emotinga smiled but didn't answer. She had erased the prying restriction on Ling family's formation, so this person must have seen through it at first glance. She was a core formation cultivator, so there was no reason for people to spy on her at will, so she didn't need to feel guilty. There was no tea for guests, and Emotinga's attitude wasn't warm either. This person probably realized he wasn't welcome, so he looked a bit embarrassed. He coughed and asked for the second time, "May I know how to address fellow Taoist?" Emotinga paused for a moment then answered, "My surname is Qin, and my first name is Wei." Since she didn't know this person's intentions, Emotinga made up a name. Qinwei, a homonym for Qingwei. "Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Qin." This person nodded without any doubt. "Although it's not our first time meeting, we both concealed our cultivation levels last time, so we can't be considered acquaintances. This time, let me formally introduce myself to fellow Taoist Qin. I'm Ling Yunha, a cultivator from Sky Snow City's Ling family, and an elder of Juyin sect." "Fellow Taoist Ling, it's an honor to meet you." Emotinga politely greeted him again. She had already guessed this person's identity. Ling family belonged to Juyin sect. Since this person was a core formation cultivator, he must also be an elder of Juyin sect. Ling Yunha returned the greeting. His gaze lingered on her for a while, then he said sincerely, "Fellow Taoist Qin, it's a bit presumptuous of me to suddenly pay you a visit, but please rest assured, I absolutely don't have any bad intentions." Under his gaze, Emotinga was dumbfounded for a moment before she suddenly understood what he meant. "He thinks I'm a single woman, so he's wary of men?" Emotinga didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When she was in the celestial pole, she first disguised herself as a man. Later on, she reverted to her female appearance, but she also had the identity of Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. No one had ever deliberately explained that she was a woman. She didn't expect to encounter this kind of situation when she came to Yunzhong. She found it funny, and she suddenly had a good impression of this Ling Yunha. No matter what this person's intentions were, he still treated her with enough respect, even though he didn't know her identity. Thinking up to this point, Emotinga smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Ling, please don't blame me. When we first met, fellow Taoist was just a foundation-building cultivator. You're very different from today. Besides, we're not friends, so we suddenly met through voice transmission, and you saw through my cultivation level, so I understand." Ling Yunha smiled and waved his hand. "I can explain this matter to fellow Taoists one by one." He paused for a moment then said, "To be honest, the cultivation technique I practice makes me very sensitive to spiritual aura. If there's any aura of spiritual treasures in the surroundings, it basically can't escape my eyes and ears. When I saw fellow Taoist Qin that day, I sensed a lot of aura of spiritual treasures around your body. So presumably, you have a lot of spiritual treasures. This aura of spiritual treasures doesn't belong to a foundation-building cultivator. So I speculate that fellow Taoist is indeed a core formation cultivator, who's just hiding your cultivation level." "Oh." Emotinga was surprised. She thought to herself, Yunzhong actually has such a strange cultivation technique? With the help of the spirit-concealing pendant, even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to see through her breath-concealing technique. However, this kind of cultivation technique basically didn't need to see through her breath-concealing technique to infer her true cultivation level. It seems fellow Taoist hasn't come into contact with this kind of cultivation technique. Ling Yunha smiled and said, "That's not strange. This kind of cultivation technique is unorthodox. You can't find more than a few of them in Yunzhong." "I see." Emotinga calmed down. "Then why didn't fellow Taoist expose me that day?" Ling Yunha shook his head. "Why should I? There are so many cultivators in the world. How many of them don't have some secrets? Our Ling clan is only renting an immortal's cave. As long as they don't have any ulterior motives towards Sky Snow City or our Ling clan, we won't care how many secrets they have. Is that so?" Emotinga smiled and didn't refute him. The real situation naturally wouldn't be as simple as Ling Yunha made it out to be. Otherwise, why would Ling clan need to set up a spying restriction in the Immortals' Cave? If there were any secrets among these cultivators that could bring benefits to Ling clan, they definitely wouldn't stand idly by and act like some kind men or women. However, what he said wasn't wrong. If it wasn't harmful to Sky Snow City or Ling clan, they probably wouldn't meddle in other people's business. As for why I hid my cultivation level, Ling Yunhe shook his head with a slightly sad expression on his face. I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Qin. This matter involves my Ling clan and Juyan sect's power, so I was forced to hide my cultivation level. Oh, Mo Tinga raised her eyebrows. Ling Yunhe saw that she had a faint smile on her face. She didn't immediately declare that she wouldn't meddle in their sect's business and didn't pursue the matter, so he felt a bit nervous. As he recalled his purpose for coming here, he clenched his teeth and said bluntly, Fellow Taoist must know that my Juyan sect is now facing the sect head selection that happens once every 100 years, and I'm one of the candidates for the position this time. Oh, Mo Tinga nodded lightly. As it turned out, not only did this fellow Taoist Ling have an extraordinary background, but his status was also quite important. Although the head Grand Supreme Elder was the most important identity in a big cultivation group, the position of the sect head wasn't something ordinary people could sit on. Generally speaking, the head Grand Supreme Elder was the cultivator with the highest cultivation level in the sect. However, because of this, they usually cultivated wholeheartedly and rarely left their immortals' caves. Therefore, they would only make decisions in the face of important matters. Usually, the sect's affairs were handled by the sect head. As a candidate for the position of sect head, talent, background, connections, and ability were all indispensable. After all, the sect head represented the sect's face, so his talent couldn't be too bad. At the very least, he had to be presentable. This position was usually the result of the various forces in the sect weighing the pros and cons, so people without a background definitely couldn't sit on it. In addition, the sect head usually had to deal with affairs. If he didn't have connections and ability, then the sect head would be equivalent to trash. Since this fellow Taoist Ling could be listed as one of the candidates for the sect head, he seemed to be quite extraordinary. He definitely wasn't the drunkard and sloppy person she met for the first time. Upon seeing Mo Tinga's calm expression, Ling Yunhe couldn't help but feel a bit depressed. He even suspected that he came to the wrong place. If this fellow Taoist Qin wasn't completely clueless about the sect's affairs, then she was too shrewd. The calmer she was, the more passive he became. Should he say it or not? He began to hesitate. While he was still hesitating, Mo Tinga calmly asked, Does fellow Taoist Ling's purpose for coming here have something to do with this? Chapter 360. Looking at the calm Mo Tinga in front of him, Ling Yunhe felt both happy and worried. He was happy because this person acted calmly, so he should be the right person to choose. He was worried because she seemed too calm, so it would be difficult to bargain with her. After thinking for a while, he finally said, I came to ask fellow Taoist Qin for a small favor. As long as you agree, I'll reward you handsomely even if I can't complete it. After saying that, he stared at Mo Tinga without blinking. Mo Tinga just smiled and asked, Why did fellow Taoist choose me? With fellow Taoist Ling's identity, whether it's the Ling family or Juyan sect, it should be easy for you to find someone to help you. Why did you choose an unreliable outsider like me? Fellow Taoist Ling didn't even ask about my background. Seeing that she didn't refuse him immediately, Ling Yunhe sighed in relief and said with a smile, To tell you the truth, I didn't ask my fellow disciples for help because of the sect head selection. Fellow disciples have conflicts of interest, so it's inconvenient to interact with them. As for the Ling family, a gloomy expression flitted across Ling Yunhe's face. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, I hid my cultivation level because I didn't want to participate in these fights. My eldest cousin represented the Ling family in the sect head selection. Therefore, after I was injured, I deliberately pretended that my cultivation level dropped and asked for a job from the patriarch, making them think I suffered a big blow and couldn't recover. Who knew man proposes, God disposes? Ling Yunha's words involved the Ling families and Jiuyan sect's secrets. Mo Tinga didn't understand. Were the cultivators in Yunzhong too gullible? Or was Ling Yunha really a magnanimous person? He actually dared to say this kind of thing to a complete stranger. Ling Yunha's expression wavered for a while before he finally heaved a sigh. His gaze once again fell on Mo Tinga. In short, the sect head selection still falls to me. However, this matter is quite complicated. Not only does it involve the power struggle within the group, but it also involves the conflict of interest between the various Ling clans. Therefore, I have no choice but to look for other helpers. Mo Tinga smiled, as if she had no interest in Jiuyan sect's secrets. She continued to ask, fellow Taoist, you still haven't made it clear. Why me? Aren't you afraid I'm someone with ulterior motives? To this question, Ling Yunha smiled and said, although I have considered this point, I still believe that fellow Taoist Qin is the most suitable candidate. Oh, Ling Yunha said. First of all, fellow Taoist Qin came to my Ling clan to rent a cave abode. You hid your cultivation, and only rented a cave abode with blue gas. This means that you are very low-key, and not someone who likes to show off. Secondly, fellow Taoist is cautious and steady. If we cooperate, this is what I value the most. Thirdly, fellow Taoist has many numinous treasures and is quite powerful. He turned his gaze, revealing a meaningful smile. The most important point is fellow Taoist's background. In my opinion, fellow Taoist Qin isn't a person of my Eastern Tang at all, right? Mo Tinga was stunned. She stared at the cloudsoar crane with vigilance in her eyes. Upon seeing Mo Tinga's expression, Ling Yunha hastily waved his hand. Fellow Taoist Qin, please don't misunderstand. The reason I know about this is because ever since I built my foundation, I've often traveled around. Not to mention Yunzhong continent, I've even been to Yuan province and Shaoyang city. Fellow Taoist Qin's tone of voice is something I've never heard before. Moreover, the way you conduct yourself is also different from the cultivators I've met in the past. That's why I speculated that fellow Taoist Qin isn't a person of my Eastern Tang state, or even Yunzhong. Upon hearing his explanation, Mo Tinga slowly relaxed. She thought for a moment then calmly said, fellow Taoist Ling's guess is correct. I'm indeed not a person of Yunzhong. Upon receiving confirmation, Ling Yunha smiled. That's right. Fellow Taoist Qin isn't a person of Yunzhong continent, so we naturally don't have any conflicts of interest. This time, I'm asking for your help because I'm more reliable than other people. Mo Tinga smiled faintly. She didn't immediately ask what he was asking for help with. Instead, she said, when did fellow Taoist Ling send the sound-transmitting talisman? Aren't you worried that I won't be able to help you when I come out? Ling Yunha helplessly said, I sent the sound-transmitting talisman a month ago. After fellow Taoist Qin entered the cave, you stayed in seclusion for half a year, so I couldn't contact you. However, fellow Taoist Qin only paid 1 year's rent. In any case, you'll have to come out to renew the lease, right? If I calculate the time, I can still make it. Mo Tinga couldn't help but laugh at his words. She originally didn't plan to stay in Sky Snow City for a long time, but because of Feifei's realm breakthrough, she was delayed for so long. She actually forgot that she only paid 1 year's rent. Ling Yunha stared at her and earnestly said, fellow Taoist Qin, I've already explained my purpose for coming here in full detail. I wonder if fellow Taoist Qin can help me. Fellow Taoist Ling. Mo Tinga interrupted him and asked with a smile, I already understand your purpose for coming here, but it'd be too rash to agree just like that. May I know what fellow Taoist Ling wants my help with? If it's too dangerous, I don't need to take the risk. And fellow Taoist is right. Ling Yunha nodded to express his understanding. Fellow Taoist Qin isn't a person of Yunzhong continent, so you probably don't know the content of Jiuyan sect's sect head election. Those who can sit on the position of Jiuyan sect's sect head must have the best temperament, cultivation level, ability and connections. Each of these must pass a strict test. To be honest, I'm quite confident in temperament and ability. It's only my cultivation level, that was injured a while ago, that greatly affected my strength. Now that the sect head election is right in front of us, our Ling clan must not give up. Therefore, in order to win in the sect head election, we must look for some treasures. Fellow Taoist Ling. Mo Tinga couldn't help but ask. Since Ling clan is a great cultivation clan of Juyin sect, there must be nascent soul cultivators in the clan, right? If that's the case, wouldn't it be better to ask a nascent soul cultivator to bestow 1 or 2 treasures to us? Why do we need to go through so much trouble? Ling Yunhe smiled bitterly. Fellow Taoist Qin, you might not know this, but among the nascent soul cultivators, which one of them doesn't have a nascent soul elder as their backer? If we can win with just this sect head election will be too easy. In the sect head election, we can only use 3 magic weapons, so we have to rely on our own spells most of the time. My cultivation level is injured, so I'm very passive in the sect head election. Oh, I see. What method did fellow Taoist Ling come up with? What kind of spiritual treasure are we going to find? Seeing that she didn't refuse, Ling Yunhe was happy and continued to say, the spiritual treasure I'm looking for is the fretless fruit in Carefree Valley. I wonder if fellow Taoist Qin has heard of it? Fretless fruit. Mo Tinga shook her head. Although she read a lot of ancient books and records, she didn't know much about Yunzhong. Mo Yaoqing's notes didn't mention it, so she didn't know about it. Ling Yunhe explained, speaking of fretless fruit, we have to talk about Carefree Valley first. Carefree Valley is a very famous secret place in Yunzhong. According to legend, this place used to be a paradise in the Middle Ages with abundant spiritual aura and spiritual treasures everywhere. Unfortunately, the world changed, and the Carefree Valley became filled with miasma. Thus, it became a dangerous place. However, the spiritual aura from the Middle Ages era still remains here. So there are still many spiritual treasures here. Among them, the most famous is the fretless fruit. This fretless fruit grows on the fretless tree, which only grows in Carefree Valley. It's like a living thing, disappearing as soon as it enters the ground, so it's very difficult to find. But if you can find the fretless tree and pick the fretless fruit, it'll bring you great benefits. After eating the fretless fruit, you'll have endless spiritual aura for a day. Is that so? Mo Tinga couldn't help but be moved. Within a day, he would have an endless supply of spiritual qi. It was no wonder that Ling Yunhe wanted to find the carefree fruit. With it, he would be almost invincible in a battle even if he could only bring 3 enchanted treasures with him. Even her virtual sky world didn't have this kind of treasure. Upon seeing Mo Tinga's expression, Ling Yunhe continued, fellow Taoist Qin, if you help me find the fretless fruit, I can guarantee I only want 1. I won't be greedy. Mo Tinga's gaze wavered, but she didn't agree immediately. Instead, she asked with a smile, fellow Taoist Ling, what kind of help do you have? Don't tell me it's just the 2 of us? Of course not, Ling Yunhe said. I also have a few friends. This time, I asked 2 of them to help me, and they also invited another 2 people. So including fellow Taoist Qin, there are 6 people in total. Mo Tinga's gaze flickered, but she still said, really? Fellow Taoists friends and friends. You're all on the same side, right? Ling Yunhe keenly understood the meaning behind her words and immediately said, my 2 friends have indeed been best friends for many years, but the other 2 people aren't friends. They only came to help because of the special terrain of Carefree Valley. 3 against 3. Mo Tinga nodded slightly. This Ling Yunhe was really thoughtful. He had 2 friends to help him, so he wouldn't be at a disadvantage on this trip. He also invited the other 3 people to help him to reassure them. What about their cultivation levels? 2 are in the middle stage of the core formation realm, and the other 2 are in the early stage. My 2 friends each have 1. Ling Yunhe answered immediately. Obviously, he had thought about this a long time ago. Mo Tinga looked at him and smiled. After saying so much, fellow Taoist Ling seems to be sure I'll go? If I don't come out, what will you do? Upon hearing this question, Ling Yunhe was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled bitterly. If that's the case, I'll have to find someone else. To tell you the truth, I've been looking everywhere for a month, but unfortunately, I haven't found a suitable candidate. Their cultivation level can't be too high or too low, and their identity and personality must be suitable. As an elder of Juyin sect, I have a lot of good friends, but it's inconvenient for me to invite any of them at this time. Carefree Valley isn't simple either. We calculated that at least 6 people are needed to safely pass through the valley entrance. Fortunately, fellow Taoist came out at this time. Otherwise, I'd really have a headache. At this point, Ling Yunha promised, "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Qin. Although this trip is dangerous, I'm more than 70% sure I'll come back safely. Fellow Taoist Qin, you must have experienced many dangers when you're traveling alone. 70% is enough for me to take a gamble." The process of cultivation was almost a constant gamble. Advancing to the next realm was a gamble, and finding fated chances was even more of a gamble. This was the same for cultivators in both the Celestial Pole and Yunzhong. Mo Tiange also knew what Ling Yunha said wasn't false. Most cultivators were willing to take a gamble if they could find something like the carefree fruit with more than 70% certainty. However, was it necessary for her to do so? Chapter 361. Facing Ling Yunha's invitation, Mo Tiange considered it again and again, but still didn't give a definite answer. Although Ling Yunha's words were very good, it was too risky to say yes just like that. Ling Yunha felt very regretful about this, but he politely asked Mo Tiange to think about it. Mo Tiange agreed. It wasn't that she wouldn't go. After all, Ling Yunha's identity was clear. If he became the head of Juyan's sect, it would be much more convenient for her to make friends with him in Yunzhong. Even if he couldn't become the head, it would be very beneficial for her to know an elder of Juyan's sect now that she was alone in Yunzhong. After Ling Yunha left, Mo Tiange also left the cave and went to the market square of Sky Snow City. Whether she agreed or not, she had to give Ling Yunha an answer. That being the case, she might as well go to Sky Snow City to inquire about the information he said and see if it was really worth the risk. The market square of Sky Snow City was located in the center of Sky Snow City. The map in her hand was real except for the sign of Ling Clan's Immortal's Cave. Mo Tiange smoothly found the location of the market square according to the map. The market square of Sky Snow City also belonged to Ling Clan. As soon as Mo Tiange stepped into the market square, she saw the huge word Ling fluttering in the wind at the entrance. Since most of Sky Snow City was Ling Clan's property, it was normal for the market square to belong to Ling Clan. This was the main source of spirit stone income. Any cultivation clan with some property would be involved in the market square business. The purpose of Mo Tiange's trip was the tea house in Sky Snow City. The so-called tea house was quite common in Yunzhong. Its purpose was to facilitate cultivators to make friends and inquire about information. At first, when Mo Tiange saw the mark of the tea house on the map, she didn't understand it. After asking Ling Yunha, she learned the purpose of the tea house. Because of this, Ling Yunha was even more certain that she wasn't a cultivator from Yunzhong. So Mo Tiange vaguely admitted that she was a cultivator from another continent. As for whether she was Shaoyang or Yuanzhou, Ling Yunha couldn't guess that she was from the Celestial Pole. After all, the Celestial Pole and Yunzhong were separated by the South Sea, and they hadn't had much contact for more than 100,000 years. The tea house in Sky Snow City looked like a rather simple shop. However, there was a tall flag with the word tea on it that was faintly glowing, which made it seem unusual. In Yunzhong, the tea house's flag was very particular. The strength of the spirit qi on it indicated the grade of the tea house. If it was only a faint spiritual aura, it meant the place was mainly used to entertain aura refining cultivators. If it was a spirit tool, it meant there were foundation building cultivators around. If it was a magic tool, it meant core formation cultivators could be found in the tea house. Of course, the tea flag could also be a magic weapon, which meant there was a nascent soul cultivator guarding the tea house. However, Mo Tiange also knew this was only in theory. Even if the cultivation level of Yunzhong was higher than that of the Celestial Pole, it shouldn't be so high that they could casually hang their magic treasures outside, right? The tea flag on the tea house in Sky Snow City was clearly a magic treasure. This meant that core formation cultivators could be found in the tea house. This wasn't strange. Sky Snow City was close to Juyan's sect, and was the territory of Julian's Sexling clan, so there would naturally be many high-level cultivators coming and going in the vicinity. However, Emotinga still didn't show her real cultivation level, because the matter she wanted to inquire about was related to Julian's sex affairs. As a core formation cultivator, it would be somewhat inconvenient. "Senior, are you alone?" Just as she arrived at the entrance of the tea house, a low-level cultivator immediately lifted the curtain and very considerately let her inside. Once she entered, Emotinga raised her head and looked around. She suddenly felt like she was in a completely different world. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary shop, but inside, there was a hall the size of a public square. In the hall, there were several long tables and chairs separated by flowers and trees. The hall looked well-proportioned, spacious, and bright. There were many cultivators with similar cultivation levels gathered in groups of 3 to 5, chatting and laughing. Emotinga glanced around and found that most of the people here were foundation-building cultivators. There weren't many aura-refining cultivators, and core formation cultivators were naturally the least. She estimated there were only about 10 people, and they were all in the wing rooms. "Senior, are you alone?" the shop assistant asked again. Emotinga regained her train of thought and nodded at him. "Yes." The shop assistant showed a professional smile and continued to ask, "Then, are you looking for companions or making friends?" Looking for companions? Emotinga thought about it. She was probably looking for cultivators in the same realm as her to adventure with. She answered, "I want to communicate with cultivators in the same realm as me." "Oh, I see," the shop assistant said. "Our tea house charges 1 spirit stone. If you're at your own leisure, we won't charge you anything else. If you need to introduce a senior to us, or look for someone, you'll have to pay extra." Emotinga nodded to show she understood. She took out a spirit stone and gave it to the shop assistant. The shop assistant immediately gave her a new waste tablet and said, "Senior, please help yourself. If you need anything, just call us." Emotinga nodded, then casually found an empty seat in the hall and sat down. The shop assistant served her tea, then left. Emotinga sat on an empty seat against the wall, slowly sipping her tea while her gaze swept over the other people in the hall from time to time. The cultivators here seemed to be much more enthusiastic than those in the celestial pole. She saw with her own eyes 2 cultivators she didn't know chatting with each other very enthusiastically. The soundproofing method of these foundation-building cultivators wasn't a problem for her. She could clearly hear some cultivators talking about cultivation. Some experiences were considered secrets in the celestial pole. Only very close friends or fellow disciples would talk to each other, but they didn't hold back at all. She thought to herself that no matter what, Yunzhong was a place where the atmosphere of cultivation was excellent. "Fellow Taoist." Just as she was thinking, a voice came into her ears. Emotinga turned around and saw a middle-stage foundation-building cultivator with a burly appearance talking to her. "Is fellow Taoist here to look for companions?" Emotinga shook her head gently. Seeing her outstanding cultivation level, the burly man didn't want to give up and asked again, "Fellow Taoist, are you not interested in treasure hunting? We're only short of 1 person." Emotinga shook her head again and smiled. "I'm just here to rest for a while and communicate with fellow Taoists." After receiving another negative answer, the burly man felt regretful, but he didn't pester her any further. He excused himself and left. Afterward, several people came to talk to her. 2 of them were also looking for companions, while the others wanted to exchange goods. Emotinga still shook her head and refused. "Fellow Taoist, may I sit here?" Another voice came into her ears. Emotinga turned around. This time, it was a young-looking early-stage foundation-building cultivator who was looking at her shyly. She thought for a moment. "Sitting here. Does he mean he wants to chat with me?" She was waiting for this, so she nodded and smiled. Of course. The young man was overjoyed to see her polite attitude. Emotinga's current cultivation level was in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. The foundation-building realm wasn't the aura-refining realm. There was a huge difference between the early stage and the late stage. A late-stage cultivator was equivalent to several early-stage cultivators. The young man sat down. An attendant who was walking on the side immediately served him tea before he respectfully retreated. My surname is Tan, and my name is Dongchen. I'm from Qing province. May I know how to address you? The young man said politely. My surname is Qin, and my name is Wei. I come from the outer endless sea. The outer endless sea was what Yunzhong called the other continents that were separated by the sea, like Shaoyang and Yuanzhou. She came from the celestial pole, so it was reasonable to say that she was also from the outer endless sea. Upon hearing this, Tan Dongchen's eyes lit up. Since you're from the outer endless sea, you must be very knowledgeable. Emotinga smiled and didn't deny it. I've just been to a few places. She raised her head and looked at the young man. He was very young, only in his early 20s. His expression was bashful, as if he was not good at socializing with people. However, he was polite and well-educated. Based on her experience, this youth was only in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. His appearance also didn't look like he'd taken look-preserving pills or the like. His movements were very youthful, so he should have just built his foundation. Maybe he was only in his 20s or 30s. With that thought, she asked, Fellow Taoist Tan, you're so young. Did you just build your foundation? Tan Dongchen's eyes widened in surprise. How did fellow Taoist Qin know? Emotinga smiled. It's just experience. The longer you live, the more you'll see. Oh. Upon hearing her answer, Tan Dongchen looked a bit disappointed. He'd been observing this female cultivator for a long time. She looked young, had a gentle temperament, and sat there quietly. Although she wasn't very beautiful, she was very attractive. This kind of female cultivator was very rare in Yunzhong. Her high cultivation level was one of the reasons she had such a high cultivation level. But what was rare was that she was very amiable and always had a smile on her face, leaving a good impression on others. He summoned his courage to come forward and talk to her. He always felt that although this girl was already in the late stage of the foundation-building realm, she should be very young. Maybe she was only in her 70s or 80s, so she shouldn't be much older than him. However, Emotinga's words just now hinted that he was quite old, which made his guess come to nothing. He was very disappointed. However, no matter how disappointed he was, being able to communicate with a fellow late-stage foundation-building cultivator was something he could only hope for. Therefore, he quickly cheered up and said to Emotinga with a smile, Fellow Taoist Qin's eyes are really sharp. I've indeed just built my foundation and came out to travel. Emotinga nodded with a smile. Her gaze lingered on Tan Dongchen for a while, then she asked, Fellow Taoist Tan, you have an extraordinary bearing. Are you a disciple of a big family? This question made Tan Dongchen look slightly proud. He nodded and said, Yes, I'm a disciple of the Tan clan in Qingzhou. Tan clan in Qingzhou. Emotinga wasn't from Yunzhong, so she knew nothing about it. However, judging from Tan Dongchen's expression, it should be a famous big family, so she took the opportunity to praise him. I see. Fellow Taoist Tan is a disciple of a big family, and is also young and promising. You're really a young talent. I wouldn't dare. Upon hearing her praise, a shy smile appeared on Tan Dongchen's face again. I'm nothing in the clan. I only built my foundation when I was in my 30s. My elder brothers built their foundation when they were in their early 20s. I'm far behind them. Huh, really? Emotinga raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, Building your foundation in your 30s is quite rare. Even elite disciples of big cultivation groups can only do this, right? Tan Dongchen scratched his head embarrassedly and changed the topic. Let's not talk about me. Fellow Taoist Qin, you're from the outer endless sea. Why did you come to Yunzhong? I've never seen a person from the outer endless sea. I came to travel, Emotinga said. I just came from North Pole Island and haven't been in Sky Snow City for long. I heard there's a tea house in Sky Snow City, so I came to take a look and communicate with fellow Taoists in Yunzhong. Maybe it'll be helpful for my cultivation. She looked at the young man and smiled. Fellow Taoist Tan, since you're a disciple of a big family, presumably your vision is also extraordinary. I wonder if you'd like to share your cultivation experience with me? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.